The views and opinions in this program are not those of CISA 7 or Spectrum.
I'd like to call the regular board meeting to order. First, we'll do roll call. Sandy?
Becker?
Here.
Maloney?
Here.
McCoy?
Here.
Shelton?
Here.
Sitnikov?
She's coming at 6.
Vandenheuvel?
Here.
Warren?
Here. Okay, we have 6 board members present. We'll have the 7th board member joining us at 6 o'clock. At this point, I'd like to entertain a motion to convene in closed session.
I move that the board convene in closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.85, paren 1, paren C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, and pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.85, paren 1, paren F, considering financial, medical, social, or personal histories or disciplinary data of specific persons, preliminary considerations of specific personnel problems, or the investigation of charges against specific persons, except where paren B applies, which, if discussed in public, would likely to have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred to in such histories or data, or involved in such problems or investigations, to wit, staff investigations and executive assistant hiring. The board will convene an open session at 6 p.m. pursuant to section 19.85, paren 2, Wisconsin statute, to consider the balance of the agenda, which will include an open forum, system and monitoring reports, and the superintendent's update.
Is there a second?
Second.
Sandy?
Becker?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
McCoy?
Aye.
Shelton?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Vandenheuvel?
Aye.
Carried 6-0. We'll convene across the hall. Full board meeting to order. We took roll call at 5 o'clock. I'd also like to point out introduce our 2 intercity student council members. Luke Pisani, who's president from Southwest High School, and Paige Dessert from Preble High School. Also to my left is Dr. Michelle Langenfeld, our superintendent, and to our far left is Sandy Heller, our board secretary.
And Rhonda's here now.
And Rhonda's here.
I move that the board reconvene in open session pursuant to section 19.85, paren 2, Wisconsin statutes, to consider the balance of the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Sandy?
Maloney?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Vandenheuvel?
Aye.
Sitnikov?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
McCoy?
Aye.
Shelton?
Aye.
Carried 6-0. And then we'll move to Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Then I've asked Christina to read our mission statement.
We educate all students to be college, career, and community ready, inspired to succeed in our diverse world.
Thanks, Christina. And then I'd like to remind members of the public that you can view the board agenda and handouts as well as minutes from past meetings by visiting the district website at www.gbaps.org. Click on our district and then Board of Education on the left. And then on that left menu, you will find a link to agendas and minutes. This link will take you to a website called Agenda Manager, where all board agendas, minutes, and handouts from board meetings are housed. We'll move on to our open forum. The board will provide our community with two different opportunities during tonight's meeting to speak before the board. The first opportunity is during our open forum. The second opportunity is during agenda items where indicated by public comment on our agenda. All speakers must fill out a form indicating their desire to speak. If you wish to speak during tonight's open forum, you may do so with respect to items that are posted on tonight's agenda or any other matter you wish to share with the board. Please know that Wisconsin's open meetings law prohibits the board from conducting business on matters brought during this open forum. The board also will permit public comment during agenda items as noted on the board's agenda. During this public participation time, consistent with state and federal laws, board members may engage in dialogue with the speakers. In order that all voices are heard, the board will suspend engagement until all speakers have had a chance to speak. The process for speaking during our agenda items is as follows. The board will first hear the presentation and discuss the agenda item before calling on those who desire to speak. If you want to speak during a specific agenda item, please fill out a form and give it to the board secretary at any point during the meeting. If you desire to speak and haven't yet filled out a form, just indicate that to the board secretary and you can fill out a form afterwards. The board secretary will provide the names of those wishing to speak to the board member conducting that part of the meeting, and you will be called upon to speak at the appropriate time. Please keep your comments to 5 minutes. Prior to starting your comments, please provide your name and address. At this time, I have two people who would like to speak during the open forum, and I'll call them up in the order received. First is Michael Schwartz.
Michael, there's a little talk button on your microphone. There you go.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Michael Schwartz. I live at 322 South Van Buren Street in the Navarino neighborhood. Thank you for allowing this opportunity. Kind of intimidating with you all sitting around here. I feel like I'm at the principal's office, which did happen. I am the executive director for the Oral Health Partnership. We have been so thankful to partner with the school and to see a lot of children in need of dental care. So thank you for that. Board members, I know you go through a lot of work, a lot of trouble, and so thank you for your time on behalf of the community. I'm here tonight to talk about the search process for Dr. Langenfeld's replacement. I have seen some comments in different places saying, how dare you, use a search firm for this? I think you should only do LinkedIn. And so I've been a part of 2 successful searches, and it is critically important to me to say that while it is true that you can get good candidates through LinkedIn, for the scope of this search, because we want to find someone so great to replace Dr. Langenfeld, I think you would be negligent if you did not engage a search firm for this level of search for our community. I feel passionate about this because I've experienced it personally. When using a search firm, I'm not sure you as a board have the resources, the time, nor the expertise to vet candidates appropriately like a search firm would do. I don't know that you can find all the candidates nationwide to bring into our district, the type of person that we need. And I think that's it. I hope you will, hear that recommendation.
Thank you, Michael. All right, thanks. Next, Alex Mino, am I reading that correctly?
Is it working? We're good. Good evening. Thank you for having me. I mostly read from a prepared statement that I have. But first of all, my name is Alex Mino. I live at 2819 West Penwood Circle, and I'm also currently in my 10th year in the district. And I'm from this district in Green Bay as well my whole life. So I recently just found out yesterday that one of our topics tonight, and even found out today that it's probably mostly just an update, is class size. But it's definitely something that with my wife and colleagues and myself has been a huge topic that's on our mind. And something obviously that we deal with all the time. But since it's something that you're currently going to be touching on tonight, I just wanted to at least put in my 10 cents and at least give you an idea of where I'm coming from the things that I see in some of our schools. So I guess to get started, I'm here to provide some perspective on the realities in many of our schools, obviously not all. But I feel it's of major importance and something that we probably need to consider addressing sooner than later. I've taught Phy Ed Health and Spanish in our district at many grade levels, and I've taught in six of our schools so far. So pretty good perspective. And class size is an issue that in our district especially, it is an issue, especially since some of our schools have more at-risk and high-need students than many schools across the state. And many East Side schools, as you know, are very overcrowded to begin with. The reality is class size can be nothing, but it can be everything at the same time. The makeup of a class is one of the main things I want to touch upon that really matters the most. Make no mistake, I'm not alone when I share the following description of just one of the classes I've had in very recent memory. 32 students, 15 special ed, 9 ELL. And you do have to look deeper though, because some of those kids with those labels, those are high achieving and can be well-behaved kids as well. And sometimes they're not. But similarly, regardless of language or IEP, many students present other challenges. One student was out of school in 2 months because his behavior was so extreme, swearing at students, running out of class daily. Most of the students' test scores in that class were below proficient in their skills behind grade level. Very rarely were a number of them prepared for class, and a lot of them were absent at least 1 day a week. To emphasize what we see, I had an 8th grade girl that I had last year.
Alex, can I just...
Yes? Okay, to continue somewhat where I left off, just to make sure we're being, I guess, safe and private and covering all bases. Definitely something I'm aware of. But I would say this, there are many teachers, including myself, that have had students that have, talked to them about, committing suicide. That's a huge topic of concern right now in students that are dealing with lots of depression. And this is something that a lot of us teachers, we deal with every year. Many students, not just usually one. But the point is that class size and the makeup of the class matters more than you can often imagine, especially in 2019. I mean, no longer do kids come from fairly homogeneous backgrounds with minimal complexities. I mean, our classes have so many diverse needs. They can have very high level needs today, and it's somewhat not like what it used to be. I think some of the things we often think about, we all realize this. So try to speed up a little bit. The big thing is we're all looking for progress. We're all looking for our kids to achieve and to take that next step. And I feel like adequate progress, the progress we want, it's going to be very hard to obtain unless we start thinking about how many kids we put in front of teachers. The kids who perform well present some challenges. A class like that is totally doable, but it's much more complex. The age, the grade level, the class, the teaching space, para support, all those things matter. As a middle school teacher, the idea that 32 kids as a cap will work is very arbitrary. Again, it neglects the complexities of our schools, our kids, and all of their needs. Some of the common responses have been, there's nothing we can do, the cap is 32, it's out of my control, or sometimes just kind of ignored. So I mean, imagine 65 kids in one regular sized gym, not a old, really large, like triple high school gym, and trying to be productive and safe. That's stuff that we see every day in a lot of our schools, and it just doesn't really work. It doesn't allow you to make really any significant progress. To finish, I implore you to please learn more from teachers about the severity of this issue and how we can go forward. Too many kids in a class and ones with so many challenges is what wears on teachers. Obviously, we're having a hard time finding a lot of teachers and qualified teachers who can do a good job and are willing to stick it out for a while. Please understand that I don't feel like this is a want. If we expect, again, to reach our goals, to have positive change in the lives of all of our students, we need smaller class sizes. Please make this a focal point going forward so that hopefully we can all benefit. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Alex. Yes. Alex, Dr. Langfeld wants to ask you a question.
Thanks. Hi, Alex.
Good evening.
You have to turn yours,
No.
every time you turn yours on, you turn her off.
It's gonna go bounce back.
I can just do it without.
No, go ahead. You're
You
good.
guys can use your teacher voices.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do have those. Thank you. Thank you for coming forward and having this important discussion, and you talk about makeup of a class and so forth. One thing you said that if you could provide more information to Mr. Magus or me or someone, I'm concerned about the comment "just ignored." One of the requests that I know that has been asked of our executive directors is to carefully monitor and hear the voices, and that may not have always been the case. It certainly is the case now, so I just put that out on the table too. So if you have other information or specific information, please let us know, because again, the monitoring of these numbers is daily. And I think that we all agree the importance and the complexities of the children served. The right supports have to be there as well. So anyway, thank you for coming forward.
Andrew?
Yes, a question for you. You can feel free if you don't like any of my questions. You can pass if you want. That's fine too. The idea of there being a overall cap of total students in the middle and high school, does that take care of the problem if you have some big ones, or no, and why? So you have a 32, but then you're going to have something lower, so you're not going to go over 150, for example.
I guess I don't entirely understand your question, but I think to maybe answer it and tell me if I'm wrong, I think the thing is that at the very least, we have to look at reducing the cap if we are going to have kind of that hard cap to an extent. And you think about SAGE, and there's a reason that you had a SAGE number for certain schools, and it's kind of the same concept that when you're trying to address such a wide array of needs and at such a high level that you're only one teacher, and you talk about building relationships. That's so much that I've heard every year I've been in the district and everything that I believe in, but you can't when you're being pulled out and around so many different ways. And if 32 can work, if you have a class that everybody's on board, they're doing what they need, they don't present a lot of challenges, but that number can be just unimaginable if you start to get 4, 5, 10 kids that are running out of class that have significant needs based on whatever their circumstances. And so 32 can, like I said, it can be perfect, it's totally manageable, and it could be you need 18 in that class. So it's hard to pin one solution, but at the very least you have to start looking at how to reduce that number, particularly in our most needy schools with our most amount of challenges, whether it's behaviorally, academic, and so forth.
Okay, I thought you would maybe say something similar to that. So you're not, I was just trying to clarify, I guess, the idea of, well, if we're going to be really big in one class, giving a smaller one, there's more to it than that, because that might potentially, you could be very readily able to handle everyone's needs in the smaller class, but the large class you may or may not, and the fact that it averages out to a certain lower number doesn't help the large class.
I think that would probably be accurate. And just to give one quick example, I took an additional student in one of my classes this year from another teacher because there was 2 new 6th grade students that had severe disability and they needed a para. But that para was supposed to be with both kids at our in 2 different classes, and that can't happen. So I took that one on, so then at least we could benefit from having that para with 2 students. But that class was, the first question was, what number does that put us at? Was that 32 or 33? And those are all of the dynamics of what we have to figure out. And that's just those 2 kids. That didn't account for what the makeup was of the other kids. So.
All right, thank you,
Thanks,
Alex.
Alex.
Oh, okay.
So you've been here for 10 years, right? So when you started, can you kind of take us to where your class sizes were 10 years ago? Maybe even, just kind of like split it into what that looks like.
Again, trying to answer the question and still be mindful of time and agenda items. So I've taught at a number of different schools and capacities in different subject areas, and I know this, for example, this year, out of my 10 sections, 8 of them are over 30 kids, and only 2 are not. Last year, I believe I only had 5 or 6 of my sections that were over 30 kids. And there's many reasons for that. It's not that simple, but the reality is I've had a lot of classes over the last 10 years that have been at more than 30 kids, and in a very consistent amount of those times, I just don't ever, I feel like I'm overstretched and I can't give those kids what they need and be as successful regardless of my ability, as a teacher. I would say the other thing too is a lot of it is dependent on schools sometimes. Some of our schools that have just a lot of kids and parents wanting to send their kids there. I've had super large class sizes with 32 kids and they're all on the ball and they're all great and they're all a lot of family support and it's a piece of cake. And you can really get the kids to do some amazing things. And then some schools I've been at where, there's really been no rhyme or reason or consistent pattern that I've noticed personally. But that also is dependent on the school. And enrollment in some of our schools has changed so much that that's been a huge factor too. So I know one of our things we're looking at is what's happening with enrollment, and I think that's a huge piece of this, but there's really no one clear, easy, linear answer for you. But
Okay, Andrew.
I'm also just wondering too, have you at any point used the official class size review procedure?
no, I am not very overly well versed on that.
Quick question, Alex. You teach, do you see different numbers in different content areas? So you have physical education. Do you see that being your highest? Are we talking? I don't know what we're talking here. Sometimes that happens where just trying to get a sense of if there's different requirements or different caps at different levels of different courses that you're teaching.
So yes, there are, and I believe, and I could be corrected if I'm wrong in this, but I believe there's actually different caps for different ages and also content areas. For example, electives like specials, they have a higher cap, and I believe the difference is like 3 or 4 kids per class. I think it goes from like 28 to 32, and again, I could be just off on that. But electives typically end up getting a lot more kids put in them, whether it's FIAD or art or other things. And especially when, and maybe this is me being, when I was a so-called snobby Spanish teacher, when that's a high school credit class or what I would maybe poorly term as an academic elective, when it's more advanced, it's harder, and there's a lot more going on. That 32 is really tough. But as a FIAD teacher, 32 can be much more manageable because intellectually, it's not as complex. So there are the differences in the numbers and also between content areas that can make a difference too, and there are differences.
Thank you, Alex.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
All right, I'd entertain a motion under minutes.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the minutes have been approved. Next is monitoring reports, and that'll be facilitated by Laura McCoy.
On the agenda tonight is class sizes update.
Bringing a little hydration just in case I'm up here for a little bit, just with a dry throat with the fall. But just wanted to make sure that we are ready to go. Class size is a, oops, I don't know if the TV over here is working, but if this monitor works. So class size, as you just heard from our comments and from other discussion, is a serious topic. It's something that we take very seriously. We work on staffing throughout the year, throughout the summer, and the time that we're in right now, the first 2 to 3 weeks of the school year is a time at which we are working together to balance class size and make sure that our classes are as equitably serving students as possible, as well as considering the needs of the thriving workforce. So it is a little bit early to look at class size. Generally, the class sizes are more permanent after third Friday count, which is coming up this Friday. So our information at that point will be more concrete. And I think that as well, there are always things that we're working to smooth out as far as enrollment dips or also enrollment where classes are high. So the clicker is not working. Sorry. Thanks. So, you don't mind? Thank you. So our, I apologize, just one second. Let me get it back in. So basically the purpose of tonight is to provide a preliminary, and this is very much a preliminary snapshot on our current class enrollments. And please note that this information is in flux prior to the third Friday count, and many adjustments are still being made, particularly at the secondary level. The information basically to put together the report, it is a frozen point as of about Tuesday of last week because we needed the information in the system and then have that information reported up so that it could be put into reports and then linked into our document. And so that was this is the most current information we had when preparing the report, but it doesn't fully represent the current reality nor the post third Friday reality. So, our staffing process, initial decisions are made in the spring, and we look at a variety of different things in the springtime when we're going through our staffing cycle. And I've worked in the staffing area as a teacher, as an administrator, and then now as a person who is coordinating people who are doing the staffing overall. But we base it on a number of different drivers, and I think that's really important to think about. What are the things that drive our decision making? And then what are we viewing as our primary drivers and secondary drivers in that decision making? If we could serve all the purposes, the intents that we would like to, we would have very low class sizes, we would have all students getting every class that they wanted. There are many things that we're striving to work towards together. We also look at enrollment projections, and our enrollment projections in the spring showed that we were declining, that we had declining enrollment, as well as when we looked at our estimates of projected revenue and expenditures, we were uncertain about our revenues. When we were looking at the state biennium budget, we did not have concrete information as to what the results were going to be of the state budget, and the forecast from our best analysis from our financial perspective was that we should not expect the worst, but be careful and be cautious in case of a rainy day. And so with that, the spring data called for a 2% reduction in expenditures overall as a district. Now, not just staffing, but that comes into buying of different things, curriculum adoption, and staffing overall. But as we've expressed before, staffing is one of the largest expenditures of the district, and so it does constitute the vast majority of the budget. And so when we are looking at 2%, we have to look at all areas, including staffing. So again, we prioritize from a variety of different means. We look at what are the student requests. Some classes we have students with 5 students requesting something. Sometimes we have 35 students requesting something. It's challenging. It's really great when you end up with a perfect number of students requesting a singular class. If you end up with 50 students requesting a class, that's great because you can split it into 2 separate sections. It gets a little harder when you have something like 35 students selecting a class because we don't necessarily want to run a class with that many students. But if we split that class, then it is taking a moderately large amount of resource, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the scheduling process because there are a number of different factors that go into that. And Eric, I know you as a former administrator did scheduling more at the elementary level, but the elementary level can have its challenges as well. But when it comes to secondary scheduling, there are additional factors, and those come into what are the classes that the students are taking when they aren't taking the particular class that you're looking at. And as a for instance, and I'm just going to give an example of something that occurred sometimes when I was scheduling, if we have a student that wants to take orchestra, but they happen to be in a foreign language class that doesn't have high enrollment, in this case in my school it was German, it was really challenging because you couldn't create a schedule that had German and orchestra unless you were splitting an already small class of German into 2 very, very small sections. And you didn't necessarily have somebody, when you're looking at one person teaching, you couldn't necessarily create 2 orchestra classes at the same time because you only have 1 orchestra teacher teaching that. So I can go into greater depth, and I'd be glad to walk people through some individual examples, and as well when we look at tonight's data, if there are individual situations that come up, I'd like us to take the time to go back and talk with our principals and executive directors related to initial concerns that may come up, because there are sometimes extenuating circumstances. Sometimes in a very small school, we might have a track of students that can't be split, for example. If there just physically are not additional classrooms and the number is right there on the edge, sometimes we've offered additional supports like a paraprofessional in class to assist. We would prefer to split, but sometimes we've had to look at that option as well. So we also look, of course, and quite importantly, our school policies, our school board policies. What are the guidelines, what do the policies say, and what do the rules say? And we'll be going into that as well. So, as I expressed before, as we're doing the work, we were careful about our staffing, but we also were very careful to include extra money in our budget in case there were situations that needed to be addressed. As you see from our reports, there are some classes that have a high level of students, or we end up with students transitioning at the very end into a school, and we end up with a class size that's too high to run at that amount. So we have budgeted $2 million to anticipate hotspots, basically, hotspots that might emerge based on enrollment shifts and identification of student needs. Sometimes we end up with students, as our person before mentioned, that have intensive additional needs, and there are times that we need to add a paraprofessional, or we might need to add an additional ELL teacher or an additional special ed teacher because of those student needs. So we have actually added more than $1 million of that $2 million that we had set aside to additional staffing, looking at teachers, counselors, and other support positions. So we have spent that thus far. It's not that we wouldn't look for other funds within if we exceeded that amount, but that is what we've allocated in addition to what we've allocated for staffing thus far. So we also, in the past 2 years prior, in the 18-19 school year, and the year before that, in the 17-18 school year, also spent about an additional $2 million on staffing over what we had spent the prior year, because we wanted to make sure that we were addressing the changing student needs. And all that time that we added $1 million this year and $4 million in the 2 years prior, is when we had basically flat enrollment or declining enrollment. I would say that there are additional needs that need to be addressed, but when the student population is staying the same and we're adding $5 million into additional staffing, we hope that that results in some additional supports. So, again, there is a process for looking at fluctuating enrollment. And I am going into detail about this because I know sometimes things just don't seem to make logical sense as when you look at just a number. So understanding our process that we go through is important. So we do have very frequent monitoring of our numbers. Daily monitoring, sometimes a couple of times a day. The executive directors are working together and then with me to look at different numbers in different classes. Particularly at the elementary, because the elementary is in a state of flux at all times. Secondary is in a state of flux as well, but once the schedule is set, it is harder to add FTE just as a straight up add to that system to make it work. So also, the school teams, in conjunction with the executive director, evaluate the situation and they look at possible solutions for those situations. Quite often, we'll end up reallocating or adding additional staff to that situation to take care of things. And then also at the beginning of the school year, when we have certain hotspots that we know might be a factor, we also have emeritus teachers who are lined up to serve within those schools. So if McCullough has a grade level that we know is going to be high, and we're not 100% sure how many, because when the students walk in, not all the students that are registered necessarily end up showing at the beginning. We still want to make sure that we have somebody there to be an extra pair of hands, an extra pair of eyes, and a caring person to form those relationships and work with our kids. So we have emeritus teachers who are working in those buildings with fluctuating enrollment for the first several days and weeks. Then we have our class sizes, size policy, our rule policy, and then the class size procedures, as well as we do look at our AGR ratios as well. So if you can click on the class size policy for just a moment. You'll see that that is a relatively basic policy. It outlines the parameters of scheduling, but it does not go deep into the actual guidelines on what we do in the scheduling situation. As you know, quite often a policy will lay out kind of the framework for how the rule and the guidelines work from there. And if you click on the next link, that is our class staffing guidelines. And it does get a little interesting because it talks about what is the process in detail that we go through when we're looking at our class sizes. We try to keep our numbers low, and there are guidelines for which we look at that. And as Mr. Becker was asking some questions around how does it work when you have an overall average of students in class versus maybe having a bubble of a huge class and then several smaller classes. When people schedule, they do try very, very hard. It's a complex process, and it's something that people spend a lot of time in. And it can be kind of like a puzzle. In fact, some people really enjoy the work of scheduling. I got to that point where it was really interesting to see how even you can make those classes. How can you work the Rubik's Cube of the master schedule to make sure things are shifted to best serve kids. But it is a skill, and it is something that we work with our principals on through the support of the executive directors. And also we have previously years ago worked with consultants who had done some work with us related to scheduling. So that guideline offers the guidelines for what we do when we schedule, as well as our procedures that we go through when we're looking at various options of class size. So if you note, our secondary, we have the guidelines and procedures for secondary and the guidelines for our elementary. All of our policies and procedures have been followed in the scheduling process. And when we look at the ratio of 1 to 150 students at the secondary, we do not have any teaching situations in which people are over 150 that I've been made aware of. And I confirmed that with Dr. Wiegand. And I also asked her to check, have you had any concerns that were brought to principals that you haven't brought to me yet, or things that haven't been addressed yet? And she said she double checked on Friday, and there hadn't been any concerns at that point. That's not to say that there hadn't been, a side conversation between a teacher and a principal about a particular number in a particular class, and it was dealt with, but it wasn't a complaint or a concern that was brought up at a level that was requesting it to be addressed. If we could go back to the presentation. So we also look at our achievement gap reduction schools, and we have ratios for those classes as well. Our executive directors, particularly for elementary, they're looking at those numbers in our higher poverty schools. And previously, achievement gap reduction looked at, it used to be called SAGE, and it gave a set cut for where the class size needed to be for those high poverty schools. But the state did recognize that there were some other things that if schools felt that it would be more impactful to put some of the money into professional learning for working with the students and other supports for students, that was something that the state gave guidance on and gave us some leeway on. But we have still, unlike some of the districts in the state, we still set a pretty high bar, meaning quality, but a low number for the number of students that we have in those AGR classes. And so we have followed those policies with each of our elementaries, and our executive directors for elementary report that the numbers are better than they've seen in years. So that is positive. Next slide. So now we have our preliminary reports, and for elementary and for our secondary school. And then as you saw on that one slide, again, just a caveat that these are preliminary numbers, and it all gets more finalized after the third Friday count. So we have our information there related to, if you look at the chart, we have our averages as of 9/10/19, and then looking at 9/10/19 for the classroom sizes, because it's as we pointed out, we can say the averages look really good. I mean, on average, we have about 20 kids in each of our elementary classes, but we also want to make sure that we're looking at the outliers. What about classes where we have a very high number of students and a very low number of students? Like, for instance, you see there are 31 students in 4th grade at one of our schools, and we want to make sure that we are addressing those issues. And I actually have a slide with some additional comments, and I can bring up the comments on what that particular issue is. But in most situations, it's a situation in which we've hired a paraprofessional, or we're in process of hiring another teacher. But these are in a state of flux, and so if you're hearing concerns and you have concerns that people are asking to have addressed, I'd ask that you send those concerns to me through the superintendent, and I can make sure that they're addressed immediately through our executive directors. Then if you take a look at our secondary report, sorry, just clicking in there. And I have multiple elementaries open on my page, so I'm just going to get into that myself so I can see it, because those numbers are quite small on my page. Sorry. So if you look at those numbers, you'll see that we have the ratio for the number in each class, as well as the averages for the class. And then we have the range. And I thought the range was important, because if you look at English language arts, oh my gosh, there are 30 classes that are over 30 in ELA. That is concerning. That is something that needs to be addressed. When you look at the range, it does mitigate a little bit of that concern. I'm not saying that anything over 30 is what we want, but you'll notice that 26 of the classes over 30 have either 31 or 32 students in it. So they're over the number that we would like overall, but they are not, it's not like we have 30 classes with 38 students in it, for instance. And I'm just trying to explain the effects of where we are on those pieces. So I'm just refreshing because my link is not opening. So if you want to go back into the presentation, and click to the next slide. Go ahead.
So John, if I'm a person at home looking at this chart, can you just walk across a line so they know what they're looking at? Because if you don't know, I'm not sure. Maybe it's really clear to people at first glance. I say, just grab middle school math, for example, maybe and just walk across it or whatever you have up. Thanks.
I was having a hard time clicking into my attachment, so I was moving on a little more quickly there. But so if you look at our middle school classes, and just as for instance, you said take a look at middle school math. So let's take a look at 6th grade math. You see that is the line number 5 in the Excel sheet. And so you see that in the middle school math, we have 46 sections. That means there are 46 different classes of 6th grade math being taught throughout the district at any time. And this is within our comprehensive middle and high schools. When we look at our specialty schools, the numbers are generally are a little better than that. When we look at Jadal and Aldo and some of those schools, the numbers are better. But these are our comprehensive schools because we want to look at roughly apple to apple comparison. So you'll see that there are 46 sections, and the average in those classes is 26.2. Looking at how many staff members teaching middle school 6th grade math have a number greater than the board policy of 150 students, there are 0. Those with a number over 30, we have 4 classes over 30. And of those 4 6th grade middle school math classes, we have 3 with 31 and 1 class with 32. And so that then if you look past that, we see as far as the minimum class size that we allow. In most classes, we have a minimum of 20, but in math, it is 19. And we have 1 class that is below 19. And our maximum class size that we look for within this is 32. Yes?
Would it be fair to say then, there are 4 classes over 30 right now? One at 30, or 3 at 31 and 1 at 32. My question to you is this, I'm looking at it through the lens of a parent, and I just happen to have a child in the 32. What is the district doing about that?
Press the button. But basically, there are a variety of supports that we try to give. We try and make sure that there's differentiation and support within that class. Sometimes there is an additional person team teaching in those classes. Sometimes it might be a class with a high number of ELL or special ed students, and there might be a co-teaching situation in which you have 2 teachers in that class, or there might be a paraprofessional in that class. I wouldn't say that's the case in every situation. There are classes with a high number of students. Speaking to my son on Sunday about his classes, he had an AP class with 39 kids in it. And so there are certain situations, and that wasn't here, but there are certain situations in which we have a high number of students in classes. We do try very hard to keep it below 30. So if we look at, let's look at a high school example then. So if we look at high school, let's look at high school English. There's some numbers there that are, and again, as I said, this is our first dip into the water to see what the numbers are, because you want to do this. You want to see, oh my gosh, here's a high number, what are we going to do about it? So let's look at English. We have a total of 179 English classes being taught in our high schools with an average of 25.43 students. We have no teachers teaching more than 150 students. And then when we look at the number of sections over 30, it is 30, which in my mind, when I saw that, that's something that we want to make sure that we're addressing. We did have 16 of those classes have 31, 10 classes have 32, and then there are a couple of classes that at this point, as of the measure of this, had 33, 34, 35. As far as the number of classes with less than 20, we actually have 21 sections of less than 20 students. And that comes down to scheduling imperfections and ways that and I'm not trying to blame the people scheduling, but there are sometimes certain drivers that make you put more students in one section than another because of other classes that they may take or things that are other drivers within the schedule. We try to mitigate that as much as possible, but those are the places at which we were. You also see that in that when you scan down that less than 20 column, you'll see that we have a lot of classes with less than 20. And that is the one place where we have deviated from board policy. The board policies do indicate that we should look at the classes under 20 and we should eliminate classes under 20. But we have been careful about keeping many of our classes that have under 20 for a variety of reasons. One is we have heard that a secondary driver, in addition to class size, is also that we want to make sure that student voice and student selection and ability to take their classes is important to us as well. I also think that once we've made a commitment to students around a particular pathway or training that they've engaged in, we want to make sure that we have those classes there for them. So if they've taken Spanish 3, we want to make sure that they're able to take Spanish 4 even if there aren't that many students for it. So that's a factor that goes into our decision making related to those classes. Any other questions related to these aspects thus far? All right. Slide 10. Thank you. In summary, we recognize that our student needs do continue to grow. We want to make sure that we're responsive to the relationship building that we've talked about. We want to make sure that we're responsive to the trauma and needs that we have. And very importantly, because it's the mission for us as a school, we want to make sure that every kid, every student is getting a very high quality education. So class size is vital to us. I mentioned the 2017 referendum because there have been people that have questioned, well, you passed a referendum on operational cost during the 2017 referendum. Didn't that take care of class size? What that actually did, and we've talked about it each year at this because we want to make sure we're clear on it, it addressed part of the concern. It allowed us to maintain the class size averages that we had without making reductions. Had we not passed that referendum, we would have had to eliminate, in addition to quite a bit from our supply budgets and everything else, we would have had to look at up to 100 staff members that would have been reduced. So that was a saving element from the community and from the board supporting us during that referendum, but it did not allow us to go beyond where we were at that point. Also, I think I've said it about 6 times, third Friday is next week, which is actually this week now, and our student enrollment in general has been flat, but we do continue to allocate additional resources. Again, we've reallocated over $1 million in staffing this year since we started looking at the numbers again in August, and we will likely end up using the entire $2 million that we've set for staffing and may need to look at additional resources because our first priority is making sure our students are well served. And next steps. We continue to analyze and address emerging needs. Another factor, and I've heard a lot of conversation around, this is a strong priority for the board and for the community. And if that is the case, and I believe it is, then taking a look at the policies as a board, taking opportunity now, while we are not necessarily in this minute, but taking an opportunity to put together a group to look at those class size policies and consider changes so that as we go into the staffing cycle, our staffing begins around the beginning of the calendar year. As we are in that process, if we're changing policy, we would like to know those changes in policy so that we can plan accordingly and make sure that we have those resources in place. We've also talked about perhaps if other districts have looked at through referendum and other measures, looking at operational referendum and things of that nature that can further reduce class size and further make sure that we have additional supports in our classes. So that is something that the board may want to consider as well. And again, we also try to improve our staffing allocation process and making sure that we have full coordination between the schools, our school supervisors, human resources, and central registration, making sure those procedures and things that we have in place are firing on all cylinders, gives us the best information for real-time decision making, and those are factors that we're looking at as well. So this is our general update on class size at this point. If there are specific questions or concerns, as I mentioned before, we're glad to look into those as well.
Eric and then Andrew.
First, I just have a mundane question about third Friday count. Does that third Friday count just take the kids who are in the buildings on that day? Or if there was a flu outbreak and 200 kids weren't in school on that third Friday, does that mean we're 200 short? Because just sort of a clarifying question. I'm not really sure how that works.
I'd like to phone a friend on that. No, just kidding. I think that it does have to do with the number of students in place. I'm sure that if we had, and I know that there are. I can't cite the exact procedures, but if we did have, Vicky's coming up because she has been a counselor and she has the answer to that.
Let me push this one.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi.
Hi, sorry, maybe I should ask that ahead of time. I was just curious.
That's okay. There's actually a period of time after that date that we can still qualify as student.
Okay. So we want everyone to be there, but. All right, thank you for that. Secondly, I mean, I appreciate all the information. Like I emailed you, it was very fascinating. Scheduling is incredibly complicated. There are books that you can go to a conference to learn tips on how to schedule. So I appreciate the great information organized in a way that I felt like was pretty easy to understand. I also understand the difficulty between making decisions and how that impacts a variety of people. So I think back to your example of a student who wants to take German and orchestra. So you be able to find a way to meet that student's needs, but maybe that means there's 33 kids in the German class, and that's the only way that it works for that student. So now it creates a high number, but it's created, it's helped to meet the needs of the student. So I'm sure there's constantly moving parts and pieces to all of that. My question is this, and it's probably a little bit hypothetical. So if you say pass, similar to Andrew's, feel free to pass. I'm interested in what you mentioned about considering changes to existing policies. Personally, and similar to Alex's point, I believe that relationships are important. I believe that our kids are coming with more and more trauma. I'm worried about secondary trauma. I would be interested in having the conversation around potentially making some changes, maybe taking a K2, maybe saying instead of 32, we want 30, understanding. But what I don't have a good understanding of, what are the consequences of that? What does that mean for our overall budget? I'm not asking you to go back and create a hypothetical staffing situation, but I guess could you react to that question?
Sure, and I think that that's a very important point. As we know, there are effects and ripples from all the choices we make. If there are things that we want to do that change class size, then we have to make sure that we have the funding available to ensure that we can pay those staff members. We want to make sure that we have a generous benefits package for our staff, and making sure that is something that the board has made clear that that's important to them. We want to make sure that we have reasonable pay increases that keep up with cost of living and allow people to earn a livable wage as an educator. Those are factors. We also look at where can we find other financial resources that we can look through efficiencies. So what are the things we can do to find efficiencies within the system? We also can look at reductions in other staff of other sorts, which is something we've done this year. We looked at, when we made the reductions of 2%, we looked at, first, we said the classroom teacher and those who are directly supporting kids are the primary people that we want to avoid reducing if we had to reduce. And we made bigger reductions in our district office administration and things of that nature than we would have, that went far beyond the 2% there. So those are just a few examples of not necessarily hypotheticals, but recent past case pieces where we had to look at what are the possible ramifications. But I think we all join you in thinking about what can we do to make sure that every kid and every teacher have the best possible staffing in the classroom.
Andrew?
Thank you. I have several questions, and none of the questions are about the quality of the report. None of the questions are about the amount of work. There's an incredible amount of work that goes into it. What I'm going to here with some of my questions, I think just has to do with the fact that I seem to be coming back to often of big district problems, right? If we were a one high school district, maybe there's nothing you can do with a certain class size, because even if you spent the extra money to split it, you're out of room in the building. And building by building, that might be true too. So with the understanding that there are some absolute drivers, like can't split a class because there is no more room available in the building. What I'm concerned about, and I've asked this a lot, and I think I'm closer to understanding, but there's really no, are there anything in is there anything in board policy at all that is a true hard cap?
There are a few things in the board policy that are hard cap, particularly at secondary. The hardest cap is that we won't exceed 150 students per teacher, and that's something that we did not do this year. But there's a lot more guideline than there is hard cap. And I think that allows for some autonomy within guardrails, but I also realize that sometimes we need to tighten up the guardrails in certain situations and make sure that if there are things that don't seem supportive of students or don't meet the current needs of the board since these policies were written, that we're more than willing to look at addressing and changing those policies.
Okay, so, and in fact, now, while I am a little bit glad to see that we didn't go over 150 for any teacher, even that is prefaced in the rule with an effort will be made. But it's important to know, like, what things, since all of these things are guideline, effort, attempt. It obviously, if there's no teacher over 150, that's one that we're treating as a hard cap. So what I heard from one speaker, Dave, but what I've heard over the past couple of years in talking to staff is just a much bigger concern about the outlier high class than my average being lower, because I'm making connections and relationships with kids if it's 18 or if it's 25, but if it's 32, that doesn't make it easier to do in the one with 18. So where I think one thing we need to look at is where 150 seems to be the primary driver. I would much rather see maybe there be, some, although even that, then we're talking about, it's not the most important thing. I think the individual high class sizes is more important. How many times, and if this doesn't happen until after the third Friday, that's okay, but how often is the class size, and the class size relief committee is only even available to K-6? The formal?
The formal K-6 class size is K-6, but we do look at any situation that comes forward and try to resolve it. I have had a number of times even today that I've talked to administrators from the executive directors and signed off for additional staffing. We've pretty much, when things are brought to us and it can be addressed through the addition of staff, for the most part we have added. It is challenge, like, let's just say in a particular situation, if the numbers for family and consumer ed at middle level happen to be high, it isn't always, it seems like the logical solution is just hire one more family and consumer ed teacher. Some subject areas, there is a very limited number of people that have a certification, and it's hard to recruit for that. And it might sound like excuse making, but this is the reality of some of the situations that I've encountered, and I know others have encountered. So It might be that the logical solution is just to add a staff member for that. But the reality of it might be that you have exhausted efforts to try and find somebody, and you want to make sure that the classes are taught at a level of rigor and excellence that you don't want to just have a warm body teaching the class. You want to make sure that it's somebody who knows the subject area well. You might also find that it might not just be adding for that one particular section. It might involve multiple adds for multiple subjects to shift the schedule to make it work. It does, and I said Rubik's Cube before, because it is, a master schedule is very much like a Rubik's Cube, that if I add an extra section of German third period, that is going to change 15, 20 students' schedules, and it's going to change the schedules of probably 30 other teachers in the district as kids are coming out and adding those classes. So I think if we have those changes early, we can build that into the master scheduling. It's harder for us to just add afterwards at the end. So the more preventative we can be in any schedules changes we want to make, the better off we'll be. But I do join you, Andrew, in thinking that we want to take a look at some of the schedule or the scheduling policy changes.
Okay, but and I do, but this is going to be part of the tension, I think, between board involvement and administrative flexibility, and I think I think it's not okay to have such a loose policy. Although I do think there are times where there maybe could be exceptions, and maybe there'd be a procedure where exceptions would come to the board for approval. There could be, if I were to pick an obvious example, if you had Chinese at a school, and in Chinese 2, there were 38 kids, and however, you attempted and were unable to find a certified teacher in a rare teaching field, and you just couldn't do it. Okay, that will happen once in a while, because that's a big district problem. But I'm just really concerned to see how many of these, and I regret not speaking up more about this 2 million in cuts, and I guess that's my fault. That was an opinion and a perspective of do you budget safe, or do you budget ultra extremely over the top safe so there's no possibility of any surprise? But when you do that, then you have these high class sizes. I think I can probably limit myself to one last question here. How many open, just to get an idea as to how many of these might have a chance to be addressed, how many FTE of open teacher positions do we have right now trying to address some of these?
So it is in a state of flux. Like, I signed several staff requisition forms yet this afternoon. So some things are in a state between conversation with a principal about a recent shift. Maybe they got 3 new students in to a particular class, and they're just today had that conversation, and somebody's going to write a staff form for tomorrow. I know I signed off on 2 or 3 this afternoon. So it would be hard for me to say how many of these will yet be addressed through current staffing, but I have told our executive directors if there are things that we can solve by adding additional staff at this point, we're going to do that, because I know it is a priority. Terry, I'm not sure if you have a specific number that you'd like to share, or you can come up.
I would hesitate to give an exact number because it fluctuates literally almost by the hour. It's been a bit of a moving target that way. So we just did, as John explained, add some positions. So those would remain vacant. We've been able to successfully fill the positions as we've been posting and going through the interview process. So we are I would say within a time period, been able to successfully fill the positions. I believe right now we currently have, well, I would hesitate to throw a number out there, but I'm aware of 4 right now that we have posted at the elementary level. That would include some special education positions that were just added.
What about secondary?
I know that there are some candidates that are in progress that have been recommended that for a variety of reasons have some delays on their start times due to release from current contracts or due to their licensing and relocating. At this time, I am not aware of any vacant secondary positions, but I would have to go back and look at the data.
Okay, so that would mean though, it's hard, and maybe I'm missing something here, but this is a snapshot in time, and some of these 34s and 35s, maybe even today you signed requisitions to create a new posting, and I get that. But if we were to, just looking at trying to reduce classes from, like, how many of the over 30s are you thinking we're gonna try to do something about versus let it run big? Are in the end, is this number of over 30, are you expecting it to drop off a little, drop off almost to nothing, half of them go away?
I would say our aim is to reduce as much as possible. I think it depends sometimes it comes down to, and again, because the snapshot nature of this and looking at it now before the third Friday and before people have had a couple weeks, sometimes it's not even an issue of adding additional resources. Sometimes it's that we had 3 people move in that needed this common schedule, and suddenly it bumped from a class of 29 to a class of 32, and a principal looks at that number, or an associate principal, and they take a look and they say, oh, well, these 2 students could move to this different section. They talk to those individuals, they shift a couple of schedules and make it happen. Other times, the next phase would also be looking at overloads. Sometimes, quite often, when there are 1 or 2 sections of type of class within a particular school, it doesn't necessarily make sense to hire a full-time person to work in that school or split amongst a number of schools. So I might talk to somebody who is teaching in that subject area and say, if you would be interested, we can pay you an overload to teach an additional section of this so that we can bring our numbers down. And so we look at that, and I've authorized those quite a bit as well. And then that third piece, as you mentioned, there is the hiring piece that we look at, making sure that we're hiring for those positions. So we do have a number of those positions as well. Again, for secondary, it is a little harder to insert staff into a schedule that is already in place because of the nature of ripple effect. If you change one student's schedule, that means that it's going to affect multiple teachers' class load, and it also is going to affect that individual. If you're dissolving a class or 2 or a section or 2 into multiple sections, then sometimes the ripple of that, you have to make sure that you are able to take care of that and not make the situation worse rather than better because of the addition of staff.
Okay, but there's, it seems to me that the number, if we're going to make a serious dent in these high class sections, and I'm just talking about the 120 in core academic subjects, I'm not unconcerned about the others. I'm just focusing first to the core academics because those to some extent are probably easier to find people because of broader certification ranges. If we have 120 sections, it just seems to me like there should be, if we're making a serious, if there's an effort to make a serious dent in the number of large classes, I would think you would certainly know that a lot more than 4 people are going to have to be hired. Yes, some through overloads, although that's the most likely to cause ripple effects, I would imagine. some through overloads, some through rebalancing. Some of the numbers are not going to be right on third Friday, but even if a few of these are right, this is a lot of staff, and I guess I wasn't really prepared to even thinking I would hear less than a 20 or so open hires, just given this high number, and I would have thought that was low. So I'm just.
So, go ahead, Dr. Langenfeld.
Go ahead, Michelle.
John, do you have any numbers that, what Alex spoke about earlier is spot on in my head. Sometimes it's not the numbers, it's who else is in there and what kind of additional supports. And I know we've added a significant number of paraeducators to our classes. Do you have any sense out of the classes that Mr. Becker's talking about that, or could we get that data? I'd like to know how many have more than one adult in the class, because that matters. Sometimes you can have 32, but if you have the supports in the class and there's really two adults, one teacher and one paraeducator, or I walked into a classroom, a kindergarten classroom that looked like a lot of students, and I stood there for a while and looked, and there was an emeritus teacher in there. I didn't know what the plan is as a follow-up, but there were two teachers in there, or actually it was a student teacher, so I apologize, that was incorrect. It was a teacher and a student teacher. I'd like to know that as well. And, just like with the AGR when they flexed it a little bit. I think that's one point. The other point is I can't agree with you more that the policies that are in place right now, to Andrew's point, don't have caps on them. And to reset the board priorities around what they expect is really going to be helpful. So a retreat or something that I know, John, you've talked about. So I'll talk to Brenda and Andrew and get your feedback on that so that we can move that too. Thanks.
Christina?
Thanks, John. I just had a quick comment, and this is not to say that all of the other courses aren't critical, but PE in middle school, there's nothing that comes close to the number of classes. We have 57 classes in PE with over 30. That's really alarming to me. The next the closest that we get is social studies at 35. And I, speaking as a former physical education teacher, the best of the best, that is incredibly challenging. And when we think about policy and how policy drives practice, form follows function, it's something that I would like to consider as a board, just putting that out there for food for thought, that in the, this is rule 343.2, under middle school staffing, it says individual music and PE classes may be an exception to this class ratio guideline. So you see, while I understand music tends to be higher because you have all the instruments and the different pieces, but I do think that goes back to the policy piece. Yeah. Because, Alex cannot be successful if even if he's under 150. Those extremely large classes are extremely challenging. So you don't have to comment on that now, but just wanted to point that out, that was quite alarming to me.
I appreciate that, and I think when we do our work, taking some teacher voice and opportunity for that will be important. Just as a particular piece, sometimes our music teachers, and I'm not saying this is the case with every music teacher, sometimes they particularly want a higher number in the class because they're looking for greater vocal range within a choir, or it might be a band where you want to make sure that you have all the instruments represented. But I certainly don't want to make any blanket statements, and we will definitely take a look at that.
Thanks, Sean.
Rhonda?
I just also wanted to mention that it says in the high school staffing in the rule as well that physical education classes may be an exception to this class ratio guideline. So we obviously have a teacher that came forward and spoke to this. I've also heard from other physical education teachers in the district as well. And I think it's definitely sooner than later that we address that. But it's just kind of there's like a blank check in place. And that seems to be almost immediate need, if you ask me. I have a question. So you've stated a few times, and it was stated before when we met before about class sizes. It continues to be said that it's a board priority, okay, and it's community priority. My question is, because we might not be here. A few of us might not be here. There might not always be board members who are willing to come forward, and maybe teachers and community members that aren't willing to go to board members because maybe it doesn't go anywhere. So, but that's what's happening today. And I think it's important to know, and I personally would love to know as an individual board member, what is the district's position on class sizes in general? So we talk about best practice for so many things that we do. What does the district, there's a lot of numbers and we, kind of like juggle that around and make graphs, but what is the district's position on how class sizes affect teaching and learning? Because I would hope that that would actually be what's driving everything. And that is something that is just, it's known, it's concrete, it's understood. I'd really like to know what that is.
Sure. And I don't speak for the entire district. I'm only a representative of the district. But I think, of course, we start with the policies as far just when we look at what it is that we believe around something, we look at what are the policies, what are the legal guidelines, because that's the first parameter that you want to make sure, the first gate through which you want to make sure things are passed. Then you do have to look at what is best practice and what is best for our students. But again, there are multiple factors that go into that what is best for students. If we don't run Chinese because we want to keep class size low in another area, then that is a factor. So it's weighing individual student choice, it's weighing the needs of the individual students in the classes, but as a whole, class size is very important to making sure that the relationships are in place, that student needs are understood, and that they can be addressed in an individual, differentiated way, that we're able to understand our students in what it is for that connection with family, because family engagement is also really critical. So there are a number of different things that go into what our philosophy on class size is. This might not be the most popular thing, but I think that it is a factor. It's not the only factor. I've taught classes with 30 students in it, and I've had classes that have functioned quite well. I've also taught classes that have had a very low number of students in it, that sometimes the energy in the classroom just wasn't there because I had 6 students taking a language class and it was hard to get things moving. So I think we have to look at the individual circumstances of each of our decisions, but we need to make sure that we have prioritized drivers. And the first driver is that we have a successful, highly trained educator serving each of our kids, and that the ratios are low enough so that we can have meaningful relationship and support of all students.
Okay, so, and I know you don't speak for the district, but I think it would be, I know there would be a lot of teachers in the district who were really, that's what we're talking about, their working conditions. And I continue to hear about these issues. So I think it would be important, and they're wondering how you feel about class size in relation to behavior. To, there was a mention of a class where there was a student that 2 months in was not in school anymore. Is it possibly because of a class size? It's, and I think before we even go in and craft policy and numbers and, caseloads of students, by the way, nobody's ever said to me, I have too many, my class load's too big. It's never been that to me personally. It's always been my class size is too big. So I think it's important to have an understanding of what we're committed to and why. Physical education being an exception, there must have been some best practice in order to craft this, I would assume. But when we go to other classes and, and looking into some of the schools that people have reached out about some of the core classes, there have been discussions about the integrity around lab classes, that it's not actually, we're not able to even deliver the, the community thinks we're doing STEAM work, but we're not able to, again, I mentioned this before, but we're not able to deliver the integrity of those classes because of the class sizes. And again, to go on and on about numbers, as Alex had said, and it's true, and I've heard this from others as well, it's really about the makeup of the students. And you also mentioned something about teachers coming forward, and that's kind of like your barometer, right? They come forward, we address it. I think it's important that we never discourage teachers from coming forward at all. And that's happening right now. And I think that's really too bad. But I'm very grateful that there are people that trust to come forward and share their thoughts, because they're at their wits' end. They're actually looking for other jobs. And so this is something I think that you say it's a factor, but it's a huge factor for retention of staff. And I'm honoring that they talk about this a lot. So I'm hoping that we truly develop something, whatever it looks like, and we are using their voices, and we aren't discouraging them from coming forward. And my last question would be, are you coming back after the third Friday? Because I'm wondering why we're not, you keep saying it's preliminary, we don't have this, that. Are you coming back after the third Friday so that we can, I'm just wondering why maybe we didn't wait till after that.
I think that's something that I was hoping for as well, just because it's easier to really look at what is our current reality at that point. So maybe in October we could take a look during our meeting, our meeting time during October. We can take a look at that. And I think that the questions you raised are important. I think it's something that I could give a statement here, but I really would like to give it some thought, because if we're asking about what is our philosophy, what are our values, what are our drivers, there are certain things that are clear to me, and there are things that I believe. I believe that it's important that we serve all kids well, and that is multifaceted. It comes down to being, and we have to make choices that are both thinking about the needs of the thriving workforce, because we want to make sure that we're retaining and keeping our best teachers here. And we also have to think about what are the needs of the individual students and what are the needs of the parents. And also, we do have a budget within which we have to meet the budget. So those are all factors that the board works with and that we work with in making decisions around what our priorities are.
Michelle?
Thank you. I know we've had some pretty important discussions, and often we come back to policy. And I go back to this is not John's philosophy, it's not Michelle's philosophy, it's not Vicky's, it's not one single person. It is, as Rhonda mentioned, it is a collective district policy. So looking back at the dates on the policy, it's been long overdue, I guess, for a really robust conversation. We have a different environment. Students that are coming to us, Alex did a really nice job of characterizing the fact that our student demographics, not necessarily demographics, but what students bring to the classroom may look different. And I think it's a really important time to have that really critical discussion, because there are classrooms right now that may not have the supports that they feel they need, and what do we need to do there, and the numbers may not always tell the whole story. So I just think it goes right back to what we've been trying to do, to be responsive to what we know, and that's add the additional resources as needed. When people come forward, Vicki and John in particular, we pretty much given them the ability to say, okay, you talk to your executive directors, you talk to your special ed director, and you tell us what you need, because at the end of the day, they're listening to the teachers, they're listening to the supervisors and principals and staff to be able to address that. So we may have tightened on the one end, the 2%, Andrew, that you talked about, but the reality is we are very responsive to address it as quickly as possible. It's not perfect. but we have a lot of children moving in and out yet, and we have some students who may even appear on 3 different class rosters in 3 different schools. So we're working on that right now to clean that up.
I didn't try to, push it, but,
That's okay.
okay.
I guess
Go
I
ahead,
was
Andrew.
Okay, thank you. So, I mean, part of why this is here, part of why, I mean, I asked for it to be sooner than later. I mean, as part of this, I guess I wanted to make sure that this was, we had this out in the open so that if we waited till October, heard a report, and the board felt differently than the administration about what to do for this year. Now it's already mid-October and it's getting pretty late. September's kind of late too, but it's not nearly as bad as October. So I guess what I'm wondering is, as we see what plays out over the third Friday count, I'm wondering what the mechanism or process is if the board feels, if the administration comes back and says, this is what we've done, this is how many of those high class sizes have gone to better sizes, and of those remaining, here's how many have a second adult. Second adult is certainly relevant and sometimes the only solution in a full building. What happens next and when does it happen if the board looks at it and says, no, we want to tell you to do more and spend more and do it? Do we need an agenda placeholder in October? I don't know. I'm just.
What do you mean? What do you mean by agenda placeholder?
Well, if someone wants to, if we want to do some kind of a motion or a interim board, vote on some kind of board directive, if we come back and say, no, the number of over 30s is still too high this year, even though you did reduce some of them. And maybe that won't even come to pass. I'm just wondering, not so much just how it would even be addressed and when it would be after we see how things play out.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Laura.
That's good. Oh,
I mean, at the very least, we could just add it to our October agenda just as an update. I think that would make a lot of sense. Because these numbers are in flux, and at least for me, individually, it's nice to see these more, I don't want to say more frequently because I'm not asking on a daily basis, but then the context of the conversation is a little bit more ongoing rather than a blip here and a blip there. And actually I had a question because I was watching the video from the spring when we talked about class sizes. Did we have a conversation about a data platform where we would have access to this information more regularly? Or did I imagine that?
No, you didn't.
Okay.
No.
Can you tell me again where we are with that then, John?
That's a great question.
Sure, that's a great question. And actually, tomorrow we're having our preliminary meeting with Illuminate, which is the company with whom we're working for our data visualization tools. And that will allow us greater access to this information. And what part of my hesitancy about numerous reports is that, just as a for instance, because our data is not as easily accessible, the work to put together the elementary and secondary report was probably 20 hours each, approximately. And so, but we need to make sure that we have that monitoring piece. We do, it's not that we don't look at master schedule and have conversation with individual principal and individual pieces there. And you do note that in my, the third bullet point, I said improvement of our systems between schools, human resources, and central registration. When we have multiple different data systems, they don't always talk to each other well, and that's really what we're hoping for and what we're planning for and what we will expect from our vendor is that we will have better access to clean, immediate data that we can make better decision on. So I don't see any problem with coming forward with an additional report. It will not, I think that if we're looking for deep, this might not be what the board wants to hear, but if we're looking at deep, significant change in all the numbers, there's progress that can be made, but the real change has to be for what do next year's numbers look like. It's not to say that I can't hire 3 new PE teachers for middle school and bring those numbers down. It's not to say that we can't hire for certain pieces, but if we say every school you get $500,000 to put into extra staffing at secondary, for instance, that might completely blow up every kid's schedule in that school. And if it's bringing a 31 to a 29 in a particular instance, I'm not sure that is the first priority, because I do think that there's a difference between teaching 31 and 39 or 29 kids. But if it meant, I don't want the number to be the only driver that we look at. The number is very critical, and I believe that lower class size is better for kids, but we have to look at what are the realities of that situation. I'm hoping that the board will trust my work with the executive directors and the principals to say, we're going to bring down the class sizes as much as possible for those high numbers. That will cost money though. Like, are we saying we want to spend $2 million, $3 million, $4 million? Like, we'll have to look at, like, what is the budgetary impact of that? I think that we can make some prudent decisions that will have significant impact. But if it cost $10 million to bring every class under 30, is that what we want to do right now? Because we don't have that in the budget. But do we want to, do you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like we have a little bit of a loose directive. I can address it, and I can address it deeply, but we'll need some time to really reflect on this and come back and make some prudent decisions. And I think that we can do so in conjunction between the superintendent and the board president and vice president, perhaps with other input from others, just to make sure that we're factoring that in. But we'll do our best, and I've already said we're going to make lowering these class sizes a high priority for us right now.
Go ahead, Christina.
Just a follow-up. So for this data, I'll just call it a dashboard. What's the timeline on something like that? I'm just curious. If we were to go with this company or something similar.
So we are going with this company. So it's a set deal. Tomorrow's meeting is actually the kind of the initial planning setup meeting, and they estimated that it would take between 3 to 6 weeks to make sure all the data was in and that it was usable, and that will be more readily available. Now, what we want to make sure that we have for public access and what we have for access within, it will be far easier for us to produce reports, so that will be helpful. I do look at there are other systems that will need to change too, to make sure all the information is as accurate as possible. Thinking about our central registration processes, there were some hiccups and things that we were working on there to make sure that we know the numbers on day one, what they are. We're also working with, Terry Willems has worked really well with our Human Resources Department and has looked at different system improvement pieces. One piece that we've discussed is we need a system that really takes a deeper look at our staffing, so that we have that rather than just having it in Google Sheets and other mechanisms, making sure that it's in a format that plays well with central registration information and with our budgets, because we have to make sure all three are working together, so that we have a clear picture of what we're spending on staffing, for whom, and how it's being allocated.
So you're saying that if you have that, then the next time in October, it should not take 20 hours?
Thankfully, yes.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understand. So there was a mention of a class of 35, and that there was a decision to not to split that because, then there would be 15. That was used an example you had talked about, and this has happened actually in other areas as well. I would really like to understand why 35 would be better than 15.
We have fiscal realities of what we had forecasted when we were looking at our state budget. We had recommendations for what we needed to do to make sure that we were ready depending on what the biennium budget was. If we had staffed differently and the situation had been worse from the state, we would have been in a very challenging situation economically. That has changed to a degree. I think that the reality is it's still not finished, but it's better than it was. But when we give set allocation for our principals and they are following our guidelines, there are occasions where it might also be better for the teacher's schedule and the student's schedule. I don't know, and that was a hypothetical situation. There might be a situation in which there's an AP class that only one teacher can teach, and it can only be offered at one time during the day because of the other classes that somebody takes, where we might decide it's better to keep that as a 35 than to split it, because splitting it might mean building complete additional class structure and completely changing the master schedule at this time, as opposed to just adding a section. So it might be disrupting hundreds of kids' schedules, tens of teachers' schedules and course loads, completely shifting things. In that case, I would say it would be better to keep it with 35 than to allocate that. But if we are ahead of the curve when we're looking at our staffing, when we're looking at what it is that we're able to add, given that this is a clearer priority now, based on what the board is saying, and we can look at that for the coming year.
Okay, so when those decisions are made, when those decisions to do that and everything you just explained that goes along with that, I really hope that we are asking the teachers what they feel about that and what that looks like to them. And I'd like to know, other than the fiscal piece, the staffing or the scheduling piece, what do you feel about a classroom of 15 students in regards to culture and climate, potential behavior issues, as opposed to 35? I think that's what I continue to hear about. That's what I hear about all the time.
I think if I were teaching most classes, I'd prefer to have 15 students in that class. I think it would be a better learning environment. It'd be a better situation. I think sometimes, literally, I do think when you get below 10 or 12, there is kind of a synergy drop in energy. That is a factor. There is research, some of the meta-analysis research shows that the effective class size is not as significant. That is something that is still out there to consider. But I can't say that when you have 35 kids in a single class, that it isn't hard to teach that class. It is better to have that smaller class size when we can. That is important. I think it's also important, you mentioned let's ask the teachers what they need, let's ask the teachers, and I think it's and you've always made a point of this. I think it's important to think of not just the teacher needs, but what are the student needs and what are the family needs too. And especially in this process, there are certain practices that allow more voice for parents and families that have greater access to advocate for what they want and need. And so if we're going to tackle this at a deep level, I'd like to make sure that we do have to think of the teacher need. The teacher and adult need within the building is important when we're thinking about our thriving workforce. And we also have to think about what are our student needs and what are our families needing, particularly those who might have less voice, and making sure that that is a factor within our conversation around this.
Okay. Looks like that's it. Thank you, John.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Thank you very much.
Is there any way to get some air moving in this room? Yeah.
Those screens get me turned on.
Yeah. Thank you, Brenda.
Look at that.
You have superpowers.
Can I get a soda?
What else you got?
Sure. All right, thanks. Thanks, Laura. Next is our superintendent's updates, and I'll turn that over to Dr. Langenfeld.
Thank you. I'm going to start with the calendar, and we have a number of things coming forward. There is a special board meeting on the 24th of this month yet at 5:30, and then we move into October. And I know we're going to hear very shortly from the School Start Times Task Force, but they're going to be meeting on October 2nd at the CSIS 7 office at 6 o'clock, and then we'll have a special board meeting on October 7th. And this is starting the budget process. So this is the board deliberation and approval to not accept the budget at this point, but to take the budget and then start having larger conversations. So that's October 7th. And then October 7th also, we have the Teaching and Learning Work Session meeting at 6 o'clock, the Organizational Support Work Session meeting immediately following after that. And then on October 15th, this is really important, we invite all of our community to please come in and weigh in on the public engagement section regarding the 2019-20 budget at 6 o'clock. Of course, we always make it possible for anyone to weigh in through the district office or the district communications piece if people just want to add public comment on that as well, or obviously reach out to board members so that everyone's voice can be heard. October 16th, again, another school start time task force at CSIS 7 at 6 o'clock. And then on the 21st, the public hearing and special board meeting to adopt the budget, the district budget at 6 o'clock, and that's on the 21st. Immediately following is the regular board meeting. And then on October 24th, we have the Intercity District Student Council meeting with the board at 7:30 in the morning. And then fall recess on October 25th is the school is closed that day. So that's just schools on that, just to keep that in mind. So that's the calendar coming up. We also, at the next item I have, Brenda, there have been some requests to have board members serve on advisory teams. So I'll turn that over to you quickly.
Yeah, and I know we have 3 advisory teams that have been in place for a number of years. One is the Baylink Advisory Team, one is City Stadium Automotive, and the other is Bridges Construction and Renovation. And these meetings, I know, Christina, you've been going to Bridges, correct? Had been last year?
Yes.
Yeah. And then I've been going to Baylink, and Katie's been doing the City Stadium. So I guess at this point, Lori Peacock sent me an email asking if board members are still willing to do that. I think it's a good opportunity for us as board members to get to know our business and industry and post-secondary partners as part of the process of those 3 programs. So at this point, if you're still interested in doing that, we'll just leave it as is unless somebody has a real strong interest in attending. The meetings are, Baylink and Bridges are every other month from 7:45 to 8:45 a.m. And I think they're on Fridays. I know Baylink was on Friday. I think Bridges also was on Friday. And then the City Stadium Automotive meetings are just 2 meetings, one in the fall and one in the spring. And those are right after school. So if you're good, yeah. Christina?
I'm fine too. Unfortunately, the City Stadium Advisory meeting is Monday, the 7th of October at 3:30. What time is our budget meeting starting? I have 4 o'clock on my calendar. Is that? It doesn't say. It doesn't say time on this. 4 o'clock. Okay, so I will have to.
Yeah, and so that would be all of us. None of us would be able to attend that.
Right.
Okay.
So I can go and give our regrets and come back here.
All right. Okay. So if any of you have strong interest in any of these areas, let me know, and we can rotate the meeting if you want. All right. That was all for that. Thanks.
Thank you. The next item I have is success stories. A couple of things that are occurring. One thing occurred today and another successful opportunity tomorrow. We have a new program, Adopt a School, and Associated Bank and Big Brothers Big Sisters actually started working together, and they have adopted Fort Howard Elementary. And what it means is the Big Brothers Big Sisters program has been very successful over at Fort Howard Elementary School. A lot of great mentoring and support of children who need the additional opportunities and access sometimes afforded them. And I know that Our Mayor Genrich had been in part of the program over there at some point as well, and supported getting the students to be able to go down to visit the state legislature. So today was the kickoff of that, and the invitation to our community is to our business community partners to be able to provide mentors for students and really make it an opportunity where the employees can come and actually be part of that. They chose Fort Howard Elementary in particular because they were close by Associated Bank. And I think it's a really great opportunity to expand the Big Brothers Big Sisters program that has shown some significant results supporting our children and families. So that kicked off today, and the invitation obviously is to invite other businesses to come and be part of that. I know that we had Brian Johnson there, one of the alder people, talking about the possibility of his schools that he represents as well, being maybe someone could adopt them. And I know Laura McCoy was there representing our board today as well. The other piece that you probably are well aware of is we have the actual formal ribbon cutting ceremony tomorrow at Baird Elementary. And Baird was intended to be a place and space where we demonstrate what 21st century classrooms look like. And I think it's done a really good job of doing that. We had, as mentioned last time, 1,300 people participating, but it is a huge debt of gratitude to our community and to our parents and families and those that worked that referendum really, really hard, as well as the board members participating in community. It just, it's a great example of how important investments are. I anticipate the school will grow. They have a capacity of 600. But I also think that it's important in January, we're going to do the ribbon cutting here, but in January, people will be invited to see all the spaces. And when you look at schools who may have received remodeling, some of the same places and spaces and modern learning spaces you see at Baird, you will see at Dan's Elementary, you will see at Eisenhower, you will see at Martin, you will see at many of our schools that have been in our neighborhoods for some time. So that's kind of exciting. And I think the intention and hope when we went out for that last referendum is that we would also have those same opportunities for schools who may not have had the renovation opportunities now, but into the future, recognizing how important it is for kids. So those are two big success stories going on, and lots more to come, I'm sure. Great things happening, and I encourage people to, I know we have community connections or education connections going out via email to families here this week, so there'll be a lot more updates in that as well. And so the next piece, when do you take public comment, or is this after the school time task force? I just don't want to.
We do the presentation first.
Okay. So at this time, in the audience, folks who have been waiting very patiently, we have Jeff Dickert from CISA 7 and Aaron Malchevsky from CISA 7, and I believe Reed Welsh as well. But I also, as I invite you up from CISA 7 to talk about school start times, I know that we've had two board members and staff heavily engaged, and one sits to my left. And Christina Shelton and Rhonda Sitnikow have served well on this board and this facility task force or school start task force as well. So you can.
And I want to honor that. I'm going to be honest. I haven't been to a meeting in the past month because I took a new job, so I apologize, but I will be back.
But you've attended several.
But I've attended, but I haven't been there, and there's a good reason. So
Okay.
So don't give me too many praises yet.
Yeah. They have a lot more work they're doing
Yeah.
here, so we'll talk about that. So thank you.
All right, so which button do we touch?
The one that looks like an ear or a mouth.
Got it. Very perfect. Okay. I'd just like to introduce myself again. Jeff Dickert, Agency Administrator at CISA 7. Aaron Malchevsky, our Business Development Director, and works on a lot of these projects as well. And from the community, our Chair, Reed Welch, is the Chair of the committee. So we're here today to talk a little bit about everything. You have received prior to the meeting, and I know it's up there. We have a Google Docs that I'm sure you've gone through and looked at everything. I'm kind of going to take you through it, and then it's just kind of a report to the board, and then we'll take a few questions, okay? Kind of like walk you through it piece by piece. So if you look at the document, the task force committee charge, you can read that, but I always like to read that. We start every meeting with that. To unbiasedly recommend to the Green Bay Area Public Schools Board of Education school start times that coincide with research and subsidiary issues, and that's a big task. And so the first thing that I have on your documents is the timeline, and we are following the timeline fairly well. We've stayed on task, and we're doing fairly well. We're probably going to run a little longer now as we get to it, but it really talked about us bringing to you a presentation to the board around December. And we're still on track. We'll see if some of the other things can keep us on that as well. But you'll notice that as we've talked previously with some board members and so on, there's a lot for you to do after we bring this to you. This isn't like we're bringing something, you go, oh, thanks, Jeff, and we're all done. So there's a lot of things in there for you. And even if there is a recommendation or if you choose to do something, you know, we've really looked at the school year starting in 2021. So, you know, I just want to always bring that to your attention that there's a lot of work to do after whatever the task force brings forward so that you're ready for that. The second document you had, which you could have clicked on, is the task force members and their attendance. And Christina probably doesn't want to look at the last month on that. But we have members that come and go and so on. And we have standard people that make just about every meeting. But we march on and continue on at each meeting. And it's very important that we do that. We don't step back and review. We continuously move forward. The website, the Green Bay Public Area Schools has really stepped forward, and we'd like to thank Lori and her staff. We do have a school start time study web presence on your website, a page. And I even saw, thank you, Lori, that it's now like one of the lead things you have on your scroller. And we've also put something in the news at all of the different sites of each one of your schools so that there's more and more information and presence coming about the task force and things that may be coming. So again, we appreciate that and thank you, Lori. The next document is the meeting dates and topics, and this is really where the work really came around. We've laid everything out since the March 6th, and we started with the intro and then the research, and you can see all of the things we've done. Some of the toughest work, and I'll be honest with you, that we had to march through was all of the subsidiary issues, all the different things that are going to play in from busing, athletics, kids' schedules, and all of the other things that we had to study and look at play a big role in this. And so it's nothing that we can just wipe to the side. But we put it to the side now while we're going to run the survey and then come back to it. So this kind of gives you an idea of where we're at. The month off is why we're here today, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the surveys. So we are ready as a task force to start doing these surveys. We need more information. We kind of got an idea of where we all sit. The question is, where does everybody else sit? So our task force really has come up with a tool that Aaron has created, and it'll be a Google survey electronic version. One of the restrictions is it'll be only one response per device. The dates that we're talking with Lori and them would be we'd open it on Monday, September 23rd, and then we would close it on Monday, September 30th. And we have a meeting, I think you announced that, Michelle, October 3rd or 2nd, somewhere, 2 days after this is closed. So we need this information. It's vital for us to stay on schedule and to continue our work. We've talked with Lori and others that the delivery mode will be through the district email and other links and district communication tools that you have. And we'll be getting this out. The participants will be the all staff. So we'll have all district staff. And if you clicked on it, you can see Aaron's, I guess it's actually Aaron's picture up there, but Aaron's created it. It shows it's about 52 pages. It won't be 52 pages for each staff member, but all the staff members combined in the survey will make up 52 pages. So it's going to look different in the format. You've all received surveys that are in SurveyMonkey, or we happen to use Google. Once you check in and you say, you know, what you are, a classroom teacher and what school, bang, bang, off it takes you into the survey. And in most cases, it's only depending upon this or parents or so on, the most we have is 7 questions. And so each one of the surveys will be sent out then to staff. And so you've seen the all district staff. I just gave you the smaller copies of the parents. And we're building that also with the districts. And we're working with Lori's staff. We're taking care of the Spanish conversion. They're taking care of the Hmong and Somalia versions. So we'll have that for those. And I've been told that when we send them out through your system, they recognize through their registration in Infinite Campus or whatever, which version they want at their house. So we'll be getting that to them. And so that'll take care of the parents. And we'll also be doing the students as well. And the students will be identifying at their levels and so on. And we'll be sending that. Somehow we got to figure that out a little bit yet with administration. So we'll be doing that as well. And then outside of your organization, we'll also be sending it to bus drivers and just seeing where they're at on running the routes and so on if times would change. And then after that, all of the results will help us start formulating what I would call driving questions for the scenario feedback sessions. And then, of course, the data would assist us with the recommendations to the Board of Education. So the scenario things will actually be a feedback section. And if you click on the last one there that gives you the scenario feedback, you'll see this. It's very similar in a way to the cafes that we've ran for you prior. But in this case, if you flip over to the second page, we're going to get much more specific about the input we'd like to receive. And so we're going to lay out some scenarios that might come forward from the different surveys. And so I've just put some sample questions there. These may or may not even be close to the questions, but we would ask something like, what would be the positive and negative effects of starting all elementary schools at the same time? And then we'd listen and we'd put stuff together. We might ask them about a starting time for the elementaries. We might ask them for starting times for middle and secondary. We might ask, hey, if we make some changes, are you for or against a 0 hour? Hey, if we make some changes, are you for or against a 9th hour, a 10th hour? What are some of the limitations that we can see coming forward? So when we make a recommendation to you, we've already kind of vetted all of this. And if you look on that second page, our committee is recommending that we would run these sessions within the 4 quadrants. So we'd run it 4 times, 1 in each quadrant for the staff members. Any staff member can attend. We would work for getting the student feedback a little more specific. This is going to be a specific. We would work with the intra-city council to get on their schedule and take some of their time at a meeting and work with them and get their feedbacks representing the students in this area. And then we would work with the superintendent's parents advisory council, and we would do the same thing. We'd have those parents be the representative group, and we'd ask them some of these questions and then get their feedback. So it's not as wide open as when we had your cafe sessions and anybody from anywhere could attend, and we were just trying to get some generic information. These would be much more scenario feedbacks, and we want to know if we are starting to get on the right track with some of the things that came to us from the surveys, but we also know from our subsidiary issues, we have to ask those questions because they're out there. We just can't ignore those. And then last but not least, our final goal would be by December 2nd, and I'm not sure that's going to happen, but that's what we kind of promised, is we would have our final report for you. And that'll be probably somewhere in a 70, 80 page report. A lot of it would be documents that we would have fed in and so on, similar to what you're seeing today. It's rare anymore that anybody's writing and typing out 80-page reports. There's more links to documents that everybody would have. And then it's something that we can share out on the website. You can share out at your meetings. It'll be something that'd be a nice live document that you can use. So that was a lot of stuff. That's where we're at. That's what we're doing. Reed, did you have anything you wanted to add?
You're going to throw something at me there. Yeah. Well, first of all,
I commend the board for researching this. This is going to be an important item down the road, and also commend CISA 7 for their very systematic approach to looking at this issue too. So I think Jeff and Aaron have done an excellent job, as well as the committee members that are showing up.
Yeah,
just a quick background. I'm a retired educator. I was in education for 39 years, and I retired as a superintendent in Abbotsford, Wisconsin. But I spent my entire career in Abbotsford too, and I always felt pretty lucky they didn't kick me out after 39 years. But it was a good run. Then a couple years ago, because of family, we moved over here to Green Bay. And I have a vested interest in public education. I think boards have a tremendous task in front of them, and I commend the work of any board. And the fact that you're taking on this issue, I think, is just that indication of a board that wants to support kids in the best possible way, too. Like I said, I commend Jeff and Aaron. The meetings have been on point. Like I said, they've been very sequential and systematic, and I think by the time we're all said and done, the board will have the information in front of them and make a good decision.
So now I guess we'll open it up if you have some questions, or if not, we're fine with that also. Do we need to shut it off?
No,
Okay,
Go ahead.
When someone else talks, they'll shut you off. Andrew and then Eric.
I'd like to talk about the student input on the committee. There, if I'm reading this correctly, that outside of the ICSC chosen representatives that have been to 6 out of the 9 meetings, that the rest of the student representatives, if I'm reading correctly, are 0 or 1. Were we going to be told about that at some point, or offered a chance to boost or replace student representatives?
Well, it's not my committee, or I don't control that. So if you guys would like to, yeah, we have the attendance here for you. I'm not as concerned. I think the students that have been attending do a wonderful job. Yeah, I mean, would we like more kids to come? Well, we hold it on Wednesday night, and I'm not sure of what their interest is at this point. I know they'll have a lot of interest eventually. I know that's coming. And I think that's part of why we'll talk with the student council as well when we're there. The selection, I wasn't involved in the selection of any of these, but I do know that there were quite a few interested. We had a lot of them at the first couple of meetings, but as everything else, they set their own priorities of attending or not. So yeah, I don't have a great answer for you there.
Yeah, because when I brought it up, we had to bring it back to you twice to even have your written materials say at least 5 students on it. So I just really hope that, and so there were a lot of students at the first meeting and then it tapered off.
Yeah, I think if you look at it, between the first 2 meetings, there were several students that were there. And I don't know if it's rides or whatever, but yeah, there are participation. And even when you'll see there was like some parents that were there originally and then came back 3 to 4 meetings later, we just keep moving with the people that show up, and then we're marching forward.
Okay, just because the number of student representation is of meetings attended by students are 6 out of 9, 6 out of 9, 1, 0, 0, and 0. Okay, so that means it just really almost could make a person wonder, and the ICSC members are the ones who were 6. Are there more?
One of the ICSC members I know was one of the 0s as well. And then her brother was also one of the 0s. I do not know about the 5th you're talking about.
Okay. All right, that's all I have.
Eric's next.
Yeah. Thanks, really quick. I'm just curious about how this got started. So it was before I got on the board, we were going, and so I'm just wondering where the conversation came from and how we got here.
Actually, if I recall this accurately, it was a request on Rhonda Sitnikov's part. asking for that and hearing. So, and it came up in student council and we decided to take it on.
Yeah, it's been a request from ICSC off and on through the years, so finally decided to take it on because it's a big, as you can see, a massive project.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things that you hear about all the time, and then anytime somebody tries to suggest, you're like, well, what about busing, and what about sports, and what about, and so then everyone's like, oh yeah, let's not talk about that. So I appreciate the
Yeah. I don't know about the answers, but yeah, we'll have.
Brenda, wasn't there a previous attempt, like a genuine previous attempt some years ago to talk about this?
It's been talked about, but we've never had this comprehensive a look
Okay.
at it. At least not since I've been on the board.
All right.
I probably not prior. Rhonda, I think you're next.
So I hear your concerns, Andrew, and I'm interested in what do you think we should do about that? Because obviously, I think it would be great to have as much student voice in this process as possible. What do you think about that? Like, what do you think we should do about that?
I suppose, and I certainly not everyone can make all meetings, and including board members, and that's fine. But I think there must be some reasonable point where we would go to ICSC and say maybe we need a different one. But I don't think we have the mechanism in place for how we make that ask yet. And I guess I'm a big proponent of ICSC being the people to fill things either with their own members or helping the district find maybe some underrepresented groups that aren't on the council, both ways. But the students that had nothing to do with ICSC directly have one. Those two or three are 1, a 0, and a 0. So obviously, whatever method was done to get non-council member kids didn't work.
I thought you said there was only one Luke on that list that's not ICSC.
Yeah, could you point out the 3 that you're talking about? I'm looking.
Oh, yeah. I guess I didn't know if I wanted to name student names here, but
Give the numbers.
okay.
There's 39. There's 29. Looks like those are 2 zeros. There's that one's coming.
I've probably
29 and 39 are the only 2 I see that. Do you see those?
Well,
Yeah. Are they ICSC?
39 is an ICSC member, and I'm not sure if 29 and 39 are related, but they do have this. You know them.
Oh, yeah, they're both brother sister.
And also their parent is on this list, and she has had 0 attendance.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Go ahead, Rhonda.
Students, what do you think we should do to encourage some? I think you probably know more than anyone. What should we be doing about this?
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts? I mean,
the survey will help a lot. The survey will help a lot, but after the survey results have been in, does student input matter as much, or is it just collecting data and?
That's a good question. So after the surveys are completed, then we will come back to your council we'll run our own session just for the students. So then all of their input we'll probably have some ideas then, and we'll be really interested in what the students think regarding 0. I just used the example, 0 hour, 9th hour, 10th hour. How about starting at 10:30? Would you be okay with that? 9:30, 8:30, 6:30, you know. So we'll have a lot of different ideas that will really help us drive what the students feel. And so you guys as representatives will be a big driver in that. But again, we'll be asking those same things of parents and staff as well. So in the triad of everything, you're one of the three that would have influence.
After the survey.
After the survey, that's correct.
So then is it as important for ICSC members or other students to go to the task force meetings if you are already?
Well, after the surveys, yeah, if they would be at the meeting, they could also help us with the driving questions. Because what we're going to do at the next meeting after is take all the surveys, Aaron will have them all completed, and then we're hoping that that's going to lead us to some obvious questions that we want to ask, or something we found out on the survey that we didn't cover that we want to learn something about that came out. And one of the things that's interesting, because we do get from the students that did attend, and from the staff, and from parents that attend, we get their ideas of what's very important, but that may not be everybody's idea of what's very important. So we need to take a look at that as well, and then ask some leading questions about that. So yeah, so we'd like some people right after the survey if we could get some.
Christina?
I just want to make a general comment to go back to your question is how did this come up? It's because it's what's best for kids. But seriously, slow clap. Sorry, let's liven it up a little bit. No, I think one of the first meetings that we had, I think that was what was so just mind-blowing was that people would say, yeah, but, and then it'd be like, yeah, but the research says this. Yeah, but what the research says. And so it was just like this beautiful, and all of the things that people brought up are universal. I mean, there are some specifics to our community, there's always going to, but the big ticket items, that the concerns are pretty universal. And I just thought it was great that the group really just kept coming back to, it seemed like we can solve these issues because it's best for kids. And the way that you all have facilitated those meetings, the ones that I've been to, you have done a really nice job elevating everyone's voice, and I just wanted to thank you for that because it is an incredibly big project.
It was an extensive review of research too, considering, and delving into those subsidiary issues that are going to affect the decision that you make down the road. So, it was work. It was homework. It was.
Well, we still got a lot of work. Yeah, it hasn't done yet.
So.
Rhonda?
Off the top of your head, can you list or maybe mention a few school districts that are considering this or have done this already in the last year?
Well, we know Madison schools did some changing of their times, and I believe we've looked at, they're in the implementation just starting, and I believe they only did K-8. We visited Oshkosh, which is nearby, and Oshkosh was a little different than you folks because Oshkosh was in a budget crisis 3 years ago, and hence they went from a K-12 busing situation to what you folks do currently and run shifts of busing, hence you needed shifts of school start times. And so they moved and changed everything and had, as we found out, very little pushback because it was a budget crisis that saved jobs. And when you save jobs and so on, people are more willing to change. So it was something that change happened. In our case, there isn't any crisis, so it's going to be a little different for us. So those would be the two that came out of the top of our heads here. We had heard something about Appleton, but I haven't confirmed anything about Appleton doing anything yet. But those are the two we know have been, one moved and the other one is moving. So that's kind of the two we had studied.
What was great with the Oshkosh one is we got to kind of hear about their process and things that were outcomes that they didn't see coming as outcomes. And we got a chance to look at that up front and be proactive and ask those questions. And what if this scenario happened? And what if this, what if that? How does that currently work? So it really kind of allowed us to look ahead through the lens of the work that they've done before we even get to those crossroads to understand what to look for. So it was real helpful to go meet with Oshkosh and learn about their process.
And we're thinking maybe as we would go through this whole thing and wherever we get to, it might behoove your board afterwards, you know, in that time I said there's work time there. Maybe you might want to visit one of them and take a tour and look at, and then board members to board members, ask them what happened and how do you take care of that problem with athletic activities or extracurricular? How'd you do that? And you know, you'll get some good answers from them because if Oshkosh can do it, Green Bay can do it.
All right. Thank you very much for your time and for being here this evening.
Do you ask for public comment?
There isn't anybody.
Okay, all right. So then you have the last one, you and Eric.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. And then our last item under superintendent's report is the selection of superintendent search committee consultant. And I'm going to turn that over to Eric, who's been taking a leadership role in our search.
Thanks, Brenda. The selection of our next superintendent is probably I think it is the most important task that the board will perform. And as a board, our success in that search process is going to affect our entire district, our entire community for years to come. And so I think it's extremely important that we find the right fit. Critical components of this search are going to be the feedback from and the communication with everyone in our community, including students, families, district staff, community members, and others. I think we're committed to a search that's informed by inclusive feedback that helps us to find the best candidate. And with this in mind, I believe it's in our best interest to contract with a search firm to lead and inform that process to ensure that we get it right. Last Wednesday, we interviewed 2 search firms for consideration and had some time to deliberate. And since then, some of us have conducted background checks, asked clarifying questions, and received feedback from our community. So with all of that information in mind, I would like to make a motion that Hazard, Young, and Atia Associates be contracted in an amount not to exceed $33,500 to assist the Board of Education in the superintendent search.
Second.
Rhonda?
I have a lot of notes written down about this, so I'm going to try to be clear, succinct, express myself the best I can. I have not heard from one person that I should vote for a search firm, and that's the truth. And that doesn't have to do with just social media comments. It actually has to do with since the superintendent Infeld announced her retirement and that we would be looking for a new superintendent. This is something that I've heard consistently. So that's a fact, and I'm sharing that because that's, you know, I have to live with this vote and decision. And I think, as you said, it's very important. It's a very critical vote. I have a few questions that were on my mind, have been on my mind, but as we're getting around everything, I just have some questions about this. So, will the firm, if we hire the firm, will that eliminate the options of other people applying for the position? What's the answer to that?
No, I think that anybody is open to applying, and we can, in fact, that was a question that we asked Hazard, Young, and Atia, and they said that they will let us know everybody who's applied if we want to see that information.
Okay, so, but if there are, how are we going to direct that in general if there are people out there in our community that want to apply for this? Are they just going to know that that's who they go to?
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine that there will be information posted on our website. If you're interested in applying, go here. Certainly Hazard, Young, and Atia's website, and we can promote that in any way that we see fit. I don't know exactly what the application process will look like, but yes, that will be made very public.
So it's true that we're actually going to have this on our website as well. We're going to be marketing this to some degree ourselves.
Absolutely.
Okay. So the conversations around this and what I've been hearing, what I've thought about, the comments are made that we know we have to do the search because it will bring us the best candidates. Okay. I'm not sure that I understand how we know that. Because based on the interview with Hazard, Young, and Atia, I want to say it right, they provided us information for placements that they've made. But the placements that they typically made, they just discussed the amount of time that superintendent was there. So we're really basing this on a tenure. So we have superintendents that actually stayed for 4 years or 8 years or whatever it is, 12, 14 years. What we don't have and what we don't know, and what I would be interested in, the gentleman who came forward tonight and talked about a search firm that was used for his company, or other people that use search firms. I think it's very unusual to find where you have people come forward to apply for a job, but they don't bring you some testimonial evidence that they actually did something that made differences and were game changers in regards to school districts. We don't have any information related to teaching and learning, culture and climate, student achievement, wellness, enrollment numbers. We don't have any of that. What we know is that there were superintendents that actually stayed, right? They discussed the discussion came from, it was all around the fact that they were placing them and they were staying. But as far as we know, and I had mentioned this before, we don't really know what it's like to teach, to attend, to live in that community. We don't really understand and we don't really know, and we don't have that information to know that in fact they placed good candidates. They placed candidates, period. We don't really know that they placed good candidates. I think in order to know that, we would have to have information and hard data around all of the things that I mentioned. Frankly, I'm kind of annoyed with myself that I didn't ask that, but to be honest, I think they should have provided that.
Sorry. I was gonna ask.
You go ahead and call them people.
Okay. I think that what you're bringing up, Rhonda, is really interesting because it's something that I think working with any search firm for any hiring position, it's difficult to know where the search firm's responsibility begins and ends, because ultimately we are the ones that have to hire the best candidate. That I see their role as increasing the likelihood of getting the best, helping us find and mine the best candidates possible. That doesn't mean that person isn't here, but I do believe that looking nationally and opening up as many doors as we can and turning over as many rocks as we can to find those folks is what will increase the likelihood that we find them. But it's our responsibility to oversee that process and to hire them and to interview that person with clarity of what our purpose is and what our forward-thinking belief is around public education. So I think, to me, that's why it makes it so difficult to know if there is an answer to your question, because I actually looked to try to find some data around firms of what is their likelihood, and I speculate that perhaps that relationship between the firm and the hiring board might make it mucky. And that doesn't make you feel good about your question, or that's not a great answer. It is unfortunate that we live in a society that this is, in my belief, what you have to do for a hire of this magnitude. It would be great if the systems were so streamlined that we could just put something out on the internets, and get a bunch of people. But the truth is that the scope of the work, the reach of the candidates, the depth of knowledge that these candidates will need, the licensure, is so grand that I can't imagine us. Now, if we were full-time employees and we all did this as our full-time job and we could spend 50 hours a week working on this, that would be great. But I worry about us being able to reach those candidates with our time limitations, and if we would find, I just wonder about the the possibility and the likelihood that we would be able to reach all those people. So, sorry, I'm rambling, but that's, yeah.
Thank you. But when Hazard, Young, and Atia spoke to, and I had asked the question personally, I had said, so what does your reach look like, right? Because the discussion we hear often is about a national reach, a broad reach, right? Broad is the term. I asked, what are the numbers around that? Because you don't have that included. So do you happen to know when someone actually employs you and they pay for a broad national reach, what does that look like? And they said 80% regional and local and 20% more broad. So when I hear those numbers, I'm not feeling that that's what I'm going to be getting in the first place. So those numbers themselves don't tell us that we are ensuring the reach and the broad reach that we're desiring. Go ahead.
Andrew, I'll let you go.
Okay. So, I have my rule about needing to be 85% or more okay with something, otherwise I have to vote no. On the topic of whether or not to have a search firm, I am rock solid 100% that we need to have a search firm, and my preferred firm by a substantial margin is Hazard, Young, and Tea. I think it's not likely that our next superintendent will come from outside of Wisconsin or a surrounding state. But that's not the reason that I'm okay with paying a search firm. Yes, I did mention in the open interviews that I did raise some concern that the finalists with one of the firms one of the times was not only Wisconsin but within 100 miles. But what a firm can do that we can't individually, collectively, and I've been asked some of these questions too. Well, can't you just screen resumes? What about your HR? And I'm like, well, yep. Our HR can screen resumes. They're excellent at it. They do it all day, every day. And yep, they could do it for superintendents just as well as everyone else. But what's different is for the 99.9% of hiring we do that isn't a superintendent, the conventional systems make sense. They work, but you need to reach out, and it was a reason that I was concerned about certain search firms who would have, who weren't among the final interviewees that may have had membership conflicts that they couldn't approach a sitting superintendent. I think it's very important that we're working with someone who has a wide network that can and will approach people who are happily working and try to get them to apply. In addition to, yes, there are a certain number of people who already have made up their mind to apply before we ever chose to use a firm. And maybe among that list is our final candidate, but this is too important not to do everything we can to know for sure, which involves a search firm for me.
Sorry. Katie?
I agree with you, Andrew. I intend to support this. They did provide 5 pages of superintendent search history and references in the PDF that we used when we were screening. It's on pages 19 through 23. So those are people that could be contacted. I think longevity in a superintendency speaks well. If a superintendent isn't working out, they're not likely, or they're not doing good things for the district, they're not likely to stay in the district for very long. So I don't find the longevity off-putting at all.
I would emphatically disagree with that statement.
That's your right.
Any other discussion?
Also, I just want to note that it would be highly inappropriate to have in-house people screening for their next boss.
She's not commenting to your comment. You were making that comment just in general, not in response to. Okay.
Well, in general, it's why we need, your comment is why we need to have a search firm so that we aren't asking our HR staff to screen their next boss.
And under no circumstance would I be asking that to be happening. I fully understand the conflicts with that as well, for sure. But it's kind of a, it's like a bird in the hand thing. We have to do it, right? We feel like we have to do it. But I'm not doing it knowing that this firm has made our district we need a game changer, we need a champion. I have no evidence in my hands or in my fingertips or access to know that that's actually what I'm doing today. So for me personally, it's like, well, okay, why not? But that's not really what this is in general. And again, I feel like if it was there are a lot of people, not even just on social media, that have said this to me in the last few months. That it is, this is the status quo. It's doing it the way we've done it. You've made some changes. I appreciate that. But it is what we've done. So, yeah.
Any other questions?
Oh, sorry, Andrew.
No, go ahead.
This is an honest question for you, because I really want to know what your opinion is on this. Do you think that a school district of our size, with the board that we have, I'm not going to say us, but do you think that we would have the capacity to go through all of the things that we would need to do to hire, source, all of the pieces that go into it? Do you think that we have the capacity and the skill to do that?
I think our community has that capacity.
Yes, but we would be the ones that would have to lead that. So we would have to be the leaders in all of that process, the whole process. So do you think that we have the capacity here at this to lead the community through that process?
I have to think that altering a school start time and all the logistics involved and what goes into it, all of what that's going to look like, I think that's significantly more difficult than this. I don't know if it's more important, but if we're talking about what's more significantly difficult, I would say that change is actually more difficult logistically. So knowing that, we have CISA 7 who are fantastic and they've done great work. I just wonder about because I don't know if anybody really imagines that we're all sitting around, is it impossible to go into our own community and work with people who, because we already know that hazard, they've mentioned and they've been honest, they said 80% of our candidates are regional local. They've already told us this. We know this. So I'm not sure if the goal is a broad reach, we're not buying that with $33,000. We know this. If the goal is to take the pressure off of us, I do believe that there are things that I would think there's people in this community that we have a lot of resources in our community. We have a lot of people that can do some amazing things. I can't imagine that we would discount that and maybe not even consider it, because I feel like if I knew, if it was even reversed, if it was 20% of the people were not you know, that was regional local, and they were able to go and far and lift every rock and look, and they grabbed, you know, urban school districts had these great superintendents or leaders and brought them forward, but that's just not what they're not saying that. They're not telling us that. They're telling us that 80% of the time it was regional. So I'm kind of caught up on that.
If I thought there was a way to do it ourselves, I'd certainly be more open to that. But what I just can't get past is I don't think, and if the resource does exist, well, in fact, there were some of the bidders were firms that included people closer to home in it, but they was still search firms. I mean, that's what we put the bid out for, was search firms. Ultimately, for me, I don't see how we would find enough people with enough specialty knowledge. I mean, first of all, let's just pretend no one from outside of Wisconsin or a surrounding state will apply. I hope they do, and I think some will. But let's just say we knew for sure it was going to be all regional. I don't know where we go to find resources who, you know, it's not like we can, well, actually we could, right? We could have a meeting and closed session and decide about who's gonna contact which superintendents. But let's just say we had enough time to do that for all the good ones in the multi-state region and try to get the sitting ones to come to us. They're probably not going to give us the time of day. But if they have an established relationship with someone that they've known through work in their part of their state over the years, which I think Hazard can bring to us, those conversations might happen that would never happen with someone just approaching them cold. And to me, it's all about the ability to recruit people who are happily working and try to get them to come here anyways. And I want those people to be in the pool, and if we tried to do it ourselves, there would be far fewer of them. And it would be almost nobody who's not looking. If that's what I would say.
Any other comments?
For me personally, the goal is not to recruit someone who's happily working and to bring them here. My goal is to bring, like I said, somebody that's going to come in here and champion and be a game changer, because they have already. It's also worth mentioning that the members of that organization, they came from districts they all came from district that had like 3,000, 4,000 students in their district. So I'm not also convinced that they have the expertise when it comes to an urban school district with significant needs. I mean, there's that as well. So I'm not sure I understand the risk, because I don't have in front of me someone that has a broad reach. I don't have in front of me with people that have experience in urban school districts. I don't have in front of me information that they actually placed superintendents and that they actually went forward and made significant changes when it comes to teaching and learning, enrollment numbers, culture and climate. I don't have that in front of me. But on top of that, and the cherry and the thing I always talk about, and it means a lot, I have no one telling me to vote for a search firm. So I will not be supporting this.
All right, any other questions? All right, call to vote. What do you say? Call the vote.
Roll call, Sandy.
Sandy, do your thing.
McCoy?
Aye.
Shelton?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Sitnikow?
No.
Warren?
Aye.
Vandenhoevel?
Aye.
Carried 6-1. Thanks, Eric.
Yep.
Eric, can you remind me, what was the total?
33,500.
Not to exceed.
It will not exceed that number, and in fact, we will have control over kind of how much we spend, so it will never exceed that amount and will most likely be less, and that'll be up to us to make those decisions in terms of advertising or things of that nature.
Thank you.
And do we still have our people negotiate a contract with them?
I have in the past in other districts that I worked for. I can help Eric negotiate the contract.
Okay, I'm just not, we're a big player, and quite frankly, I don't believe in paying sticker price, and we've had very good results in contract negotiation before, so maybe we can get even a little better, if not on the base price, maybe a little differential on one of the add-ins or something.
All right, thanks, Eric. We have, let's see, next is Intercity Student Council report. I'll turn that over to Luke.
All right, so clubs are starting up, and as far as I know, they're going well. It's cool to see all the announcements, especially at my school, of people joining clubs and all of that, and having the freshmen get involved. Fall sports are halfway done, which is surprising to me. It's really crazy. Cross country is more than halfway done. It's different for football. It goes a little bit later. Homecoming starting up. Our school's homecoming is Saturday. I don't know about the other. Yeah, I know that other schools are later, but we're all excited for that. We have the Green Bay Area Public School Marching Showcase October 5th, which is a really cool event. And this year, the Blue Gold Marching Band from Eau Claire, Wisconsin is coming to join us. And so there'll be over 1,000 students on the field playing. And so we're all very excited about that. And then as for ICSC, for a dress code update, am I allowed to? Okay. We have a draft. It's not completed or ready to be proposed at all, but we have a draft that has been made, and it looks I like it.
Keep talking, Luke. Keep talking.
All right. Am I allowed to say any specifics?
The concept, absolutely.
Okay. Some of the specifics of the concepts of the draft would be again, this is a draft. This is not going to be proposed for sure, but that students, the whole gender bias of male and female would be kind of destroyed, especially in middle school regarding straps and shorter shorts. Oh my gosh, shorter shorts.
It's a long night, Luke. It's been a long night.
Hats would be allowed in school on all levels, and those are obviously the two biggest pieces. And we've met with all the principals, me, Hannah, our vice president, and Noah, our secretary. We've met with all the principals of the school districts, high schools, and middle schools to talk about it. And it's been really cool to see their different perspectives. And we had our first meeting of the year just last weekend. So, yeah, that's it.
Thanks, Luke.
All right, thank you, Luke. All right, let's see, next is district events. I don't know if there's anything anybody wants to announce. All right, and then we'll move on to board member school visits update. Is there anybody? I'll start. I had a great, actually ended up twice at NEW School of Innovation and then also John Dewey Academy, and just talking with some of the teachers there about how excited they are for the new school year, especially of course the NEW Innovation, because that's all brand new, but just some teachers that are really, this was before school started, just really excited to get the school year started, and really some innovative approaches to teaching. So it'll be exciting to see what opportunities those students have this year. Christina?
I've been to a few, but I just want to share one thing that I thought was really awesome about the new charter school in Jado was the exploration of gender-neutral bathrooms to ensure inclusivity of not only the students but also the staff, and that was really intentional in their building planning. And it's just sort of brought a larger conversation with the GLSEN folks and GSA. Sorry, I'm getting my letters right. Just about inclusivity around the district, and it's just fun to have conversations with our students and staff when they feel empowered to really make bold decisions and they can just do it. And they know that it's what's best for a school building. So it was just really inspiring, and I am really looking forward to hearing what comes out of that building, the lessons learned, and what the great work, because I really see those pieces being integrated into all of our schools across the district. So just wanted to share that.
Eric?
For more personal reasons, I spend time at both Red Smith and at Oak. The construction process at Red Smith is amazing to see how fast I can see no one wants to lay cinder blocks in the snow, so they are moving. But it's great to see that. And then the new facility at Oak, not quite ready for the kids to move into, so we're still following the old process. But I talked to James this morning, and he said they're like 2 to 3 weeks out for them getting in their new space, so that's great. And then the only other school I had a chance to get into was to take a tour of the new Baird. Just what a beautiful facility for our students, and I can't imagine for those 4th or 5th grade students who've been in the old Baird for their entire career and now get rewarded with this beautiful facility that they've been waiting so long for. So that's it.
Your hand up. Go ahead.
I was invited in to visit Lombardi actually prior to school starting, and had a nice lengthy visit with the principal there. And then I also went to see the new Oak building last week and got a tour and was able to see that space as well. And then I received an invite to come back to Lombardi to see the new orchestra room, which I will be doing hopefully next week. Thank you.
Did you ever, Katie?
I attended SAIL, and it's an acronym, and I don't know.
I couldn't, sorry, can't help
It was a professional development for learning teams from Washington and Franklin. At Washington, I had the opportunity to pop in and meet with some of the staff there. I spent 2 or 3 days moving furniture at Howe Elementary School because I made the mistake of walking down the hallway with a dolly and then making eye contact with someone who needed something moved. So we did that. Then attended Howe's family gathering. Their open house turns into a community party in the afternoon. Attended that, and also attended the back to school greetings that you did.
Laura?
I went to a lot of the same things, the wildlife sanctuary, the tour at Baird, the SAIL training. I spent the morning there. That was really interesting, listening to Franklin and Washington Middle School teams make their way through this professional development. I learned a lot. Went to the open house at the new School of Innovation. I hadn't been in there. The outside of that building is not, I gotta say from my point of view, not terribly appealing. But when I went inside, I was really, really struck at how beautiful it is, and they've done just such a good job there. Jason gave me a tour, and he has a lot to be proud of, he and his team. So I was at Fort Howard today for the big check, Boys and Girls Club check. And then I had a lot of fun going last week to the 9/11 bleacher climb at West. Giant room full of kids, sweaty kids climbing the bleachers, and just a lot of really good energy and a lot of various groups coming together to commemorate 9/11. I had I don't want to say I had a good time because it's a solemn occasion, but the kids were great, and I'm really glad I went to that. That's it.
Okay. Andrew?
Yeah, but I'm looking to do more over the next month and get into a bunch of different schools. I did go to NEW and Dewey twice over the last month, and it's really having. At one time, my full-time employment was in that building, and just seeing what's been done since then is really amazing inside. And I didn't want it just to go unnoticed, because this area I've checked into long before Christina was on the board, but it is great that they have made sure to be cognizant of gender neutral bathrooms in the buildings there. And I also, as of several years ago, verified that we have that option in all of our buildings, and multiple options in all but the tiniest ones. So had been doing that, and it's great to see it be addressed right up front in a new building too.
Okay, next is our teaching and learning report, and that'll be facilitated by Katie Maloney.
We have no action items, and that concludes my report.
All right, thank you, Katie. Next is organizational
Set the bar a
support.
little high, so let's.
And that'll be facilitated by Andrew Becker.
We have one discussion, public comment, and action item. I move that the Board of Education minutes and annual notices be posted in the Press Times, with meeting notices posted in the Green Bay Press Gazette.
Second.
Sandy?
Warren,
Aye.
Becker,
Aye.
McCoy,
Aye.
Sitnikow,
Aye.
Maloney,
Aye.
Shelton,
Aye.
Vandenheuvel,
Aye.
Carried 7-0.
I'll move the consent items as presented be approved.
Second.
Sandy?
Sitnikow,
Aye.
Maloney,
Aye.
Warren,
Aye.
McCoy,
Aye.
Vandenheuvel,
Aye.
Shelton,
Aye.
Becker,
Aye.
Carried 7-0. I'd entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.
You have been watching the Green Bay Area Public School District's Board of Education meeting. Please visit the school district's website, www.gbaps.org, to view the program again. If you cannot fully access the information on this video, please let us know the accessibility issue you are having by calling 920-448-2025 or by email at communications@gbaps.org. We will try to provide the information to you in an alternative format and/or make the necessary improvements to make the information accessible.